Chapter 103. He cupped his fists and saluted the crowd, then walked off the stage with large strides. No matter what, he was still a dignified official of the 5th rank. How could he possibly tell stories for fun? The reason he was the first to do so was because the immortal abode had opened for business, and the emperor had personally come. He wanted to express his stance, and also because he wanted to earn the reputation of being the progenitor of storytelling. After today's events, anyone who tried to learn storytelling would follow in his footsteps. Such people had to be crowned as the progenitor of storytelling. Just the thought of it made him excited. Yang Chendong walked off the stage, and in his place, many people walked onto the stage. Soon after, the narrator's voice rang out. Next, please enjoy the large-scale musical, The Legend of the White Snake. The first scene of the musical was a shepherd boy saving a snake. The voice was spoken by Madame Snow, who had the best voice. It was a pleasure to listen to. Soon after, a child dressed like a shepherd boy walked onto the stage, followed by a snake catcher with a bamboo basket on his back. As the two of them appeared, the narrator continued to explain. Bai Suzhen was originally a little white snake that cultivated in the wilderness. One day, the little white snake was captured by Snake Elder and was almost killed. Fortunately, she was saved by a little shepherd boy who was passing by. Su Zhen secretly swore that this life-saving grace would forever be engraved in her heart. Time passes easily in the mountains, but the world has been prosperous for thousands of years. After 1,700 years of cultivation, Su Zhen finally shed her snake body and was able to transform into a human form. Originally, she wanted to go to Mount Amei to continue her cultivation. However, after being guided by Guanyin, she remembered that there was still a relationship in the world that had yet to end. Following Guanyin's guidance, Su Zhen came to Hangzhou's West Lake to look for the benefactor of her previous life. As the narration reached this point, a burst of exclamations suddenly came from the stage. It turned out that bursts of white fog had suddenly appeared. Everyone who had never seen such a scene before was shocked. They did not know what was going on. Some of the quick-witted ones even opened their mouths, ready to shout out the word flood at any moment. However, just as everyone's faces were filled with confusion and even panic, a young and beautiful woman dressed in white walked out of the white fog. Her fringe was slanted in front of her forehead, revealing part of her forehead, which made her look even more feminine. She was White Lady, played by Lady Xiang, who had shocked the world with her dance. As soon as Lady Xiang appeared in the gradually dissipating white fog, she immediately attracted everyone's attention. Some of the officials even had their mouths and eyes wide open. Saliva even flowed out from their chins. After the stunning appearance, Lady Xiang's equally beautiful voice was also brought into full play. Bai Suzhen at the foot of Mount Qingcheng. I've cultivated my body in the cave for 1,000 years. I've worked hard to achieve the Tao, and I've been reborn into a human being. Wholeheartedly following the Tao without any distracting thoughts, converting to the 3 treasures and abandoning the mortal world. I beg the Bodhisattva to enlighten me and save my chastity. Ha 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 ha. Lady Xiang, like Lady Shui, was soon remembered by everyone with the poem, The White Quality at the foot of Mount Qingcheng. In the women's private room on the 2nd floor, Hu Yan looked at Lady Xiang with some envy and murmured in her heart, "Shameless, shameless. How many women have you had? Should I also hurry up?" Suddenly, Hu Yan stood up abruptly and pulled Yang Duo, who was staring at the stage, and said, "Seventh sister? Where is eldest sister? I want to see her." "Eldest sister is in the room next to us," Yang Duo said without looking back. At this time, even if there was an urgent matter, she couldn't delay her from seeing White Lady. On the stage, little Qing, who was played by the maid Chun Tao, also appeared. Then it was Cui Na the former brothel keeper of the Zhou Arts workshop, who was dressed as a man. After changing into a man's dress, she looked so delicate and handsome, which immediately attracted the hearts of many young ladies among the officials. Cui Na who was in her 20s, originally thought that her career on stage was over long ago. She didn't expect that the 6th young master would give her such an opportunity. She naturally cherished it very much. Whether it was her lines or lyrics, she had practiced them many times in private. She had also prepared for today's appearance for a long time. When she saw the fervent gazes all around her, she knew that she had succeeded this time. The three women appeared, and for a moment, everyone was talking to each other. White Lady's dignified beauty, Su Xian's honest kindness, and Little Qing's lively cuteness were all perfectly displayed by the three of them. They became the classics of the day. When everyone's eyes fell on the stage, Hu Yen walked out of the private room and went to the room next door, where Empress Chen and the eldest sister of the Yang clan, Yang Fei, were. Good performances were endless, good food was endless, and good wine was endless. During the performance of White Lady's Legend, lunch was sent to the various private rooms. The sight and taste were both enjoyable, and it made many people feel that the immortal abode was truly worthy of being called a place where immortals resided. After White Lady's Legend, new songs were played one after another. Exploring Qingshui River, Friends, Wishing We Last Forever, Many Stories in a Small Town, and so on. These were all songs that had been circulating in the capital in recent days, as well as new ones. For a moment, the audience was filled with joy. Many of the young master's young ladies from important officials' families had even made up their minds. When they returned, they would withdraw money to buy membership cards. This immortal abode was simply too fun. This was especially true for the young ladies of the boudoir. They usually stayed at home, studying women's mantras. When would they have the chance to come out and play? And even if they did come out, where would they go? But now, Yang Chandong had given them a place to pass the time, and that was the immortal abode. Here, they could have their own private rooms, and they didn't have to worry about being seen by others. This allowed them to be even more unbridled. In addition, there were delicacies, desserts, and beautiful music that couldn't be found anywhere else. If they didn't know how to spend their money here, then they would have lived their lives in vain, and they would have let down their good backgrounds. The opening of the immortal abode was an eye-opener for everyone. Even the emperor and empress were satisfied, and they felt a sense of enjoyment that they had never felt before. Good times always passed by quickly, and it was time for the emperor to leave. Ingzong had originally planned to eat dinner here before leaving, but when he saw the crowd of people waiting to enter the immortal abode through the glass window of his private room, he gave up on that idea. It wouldn't be good for him to monopolize this place and ignore the feelings of the people. In the end, Ingzong left with Empress Qian and the other officials. It was clear that neither Empress Qian nor the other officials had any intention of enjoying themselves to the fullest. In response, Ingzong magnanimously expressed that they could come and play whenever they had time. Only then did everyone remember that the immortal abode had already opened for business in the capital, and they couldn't run away. They could come and play whenever they wanted, and only then did they leave satisfied. When everyone left, they received a beautiful gift. It was a box of 4 beautiful transparent glasses. Before glass was a new thing, this gift was naturally viewed as a treasure. Anyone who received this gift couldn't stop smiling, praising Yang Jima for being so good at handling matters. After the emperor and his officials left, the immortal abode was filled with many young master sons of merchants and officials with membership cards. Because their status wasn't high enough, they naturally couldn't enter the immortal abode. Now that they had the chance, everyone wanted to be the first to enter. Many people entered, but they were quickly mesmerized by the exquisite decorations of the immortal abode. They looked around like country bumpkins entering a city. Soon after, fine wine and delicacies were served, along with new songs. These people's pockets were emptied, and they all sighed. Silver really was a good thing. The immortal abode's grand opening had cost them a lot of silver to entertain the emperor and officials in the morning and afternoon. But by night, they had made a killing. Only when the clock struck and the curfew was about to begin did they reluctantly leave. But at the same time, they agreed to come back early the next morning to drink tea, chat, and watch programs. This was truly one of life's greatest pleasures. Yang Qindong's group left the immortal abode and headed for the Yang clan manor 15 li south of the capital. The 6th young master sat in the same carriage as Qiao Yin. After a busy day, Lady Xiang and Lady Shui were both exhausted. They naturally stayed the night in the immortal abode, allowing Chao Yin to be alone with the sixth young master. Her face was filled with happiness and joy. "Young master," Su Yozhen sent a message. The carriage suddenly stopped, and Tiger's mane appeared. He placed a bamboo tube in Yang Qindong's hand. Yang Qindong reached out and opened the tube. After taking out the secret letter and reading it, Yang Qindong calmly put it back. He then closed his eyes and thought for a while before saying, "Let him tell the imperial censor of the left, Wang Wenyi. He should know what to do." "Understood," Tiger's mane replied. He turned around and told his deputy, Yang Qindong, about the sixth young master's orders. This deputy director of the security bureau was a private member of the Yang clan that Yang Qindong rarely saw. Wang Wenyi, imperial censor of the left, a third-ranked official of the imperial court. He was different from the other important officials, who spent the day playing, drinking, and having fun. As imperial censors, their job was to supervise the officials. Although it sounded very impressive, there were many things they couldn't do about it. For example, they couldn't participate in something as beneficial as the Immortal Abode's opening ceremony. Since they were supposed to supervise the officials, how could they be part of the same group? There had to be a difference. As a result, those in the position of imperial censor were usually rather poor. Wang Wenyi was standing in such a position. Unlike everyone else, his life was still good. Not to mention other things, he had married as many as 7 concubines. Where did that come from? It was all given to him by his father-in-law. Father Wang was a general term used by some spineless people in the imperial court and eunuch Wang Jin, who had absolute power. Chapter 104. Since he was called father, he naturally had to submit to someone else. It was precisely because he had submitted to Wang Zhan that he was able to obtain a high position, ride a fine horse, and even have a large group of wives and concubines. He had been given the position of imperial censor of the left in order to control the imperial censorate and prevent anyone from suddenly harming Wang Jin. Even though he couldn't openly commit corruption like the other officials, he still had money to spend. After court, Wang Wenyi had nothing to do at home, so he was full of energy. It was now dark, and he was currently admiring the flowers in the courtyard with a concubine he had recently married. His personal attendant suddenly came to report that Su Yozhen, Su Qinghui, had arrived. "Please." A late-night visit was obviously an important matter. Wang Wenyi waved his hand and had a maid take the concubine away before heading to the central room. Su Yozhen was pacing back and forth in the room like an ant on a hot pan. When he heard the sound of footsteps and turned around to see Wang Wenyi, he immediately cupped his fist and bowed. "Lord Wang, I have no choice but to disturb you so late at night. Did something happen?" Wang Wenyi acted as if nothing had happened, but he was inwardly on guard. "Lord Wang, it's like this. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, Lin Xiangfeng, and Yin Meng, as well as Sichuan Imperial Censor Xinyu, have come to find this lowly official. They want me to join them in impeaching Crown Prince Yang Qindong tomorrow morning. This lowly official does not know what to do. I have come to invite Lord Wang over," Su Yozhen said with a humble expression as he observed Wang Wenyi's expression. "Impeach Yang Qindong? What's the reason?" Wang Wenyi became much more serious when he heard about Yang Qindong. As Wang Zhan's trusted aide, how could he not know that the 6th young master of the Yang clan was currently doing business with him? If something really happened, it would be detrimental to his father. It said that Yang Shima sent Immortal Abode membership cards worth several thousand taels of silver to the families of 3rd rank and above officials in the capital, Su Yozhen said seriously. Last time, after being bribed by Yang Qindong, they put on a double act and had the opportunity to publicly impeach the 6th young master in the imperial court. Sure enough, according to the previous plan, the matter was left unsettled. From then on, not only did he receive a large sum of money from Yang Qindong, but he was also promoted by 1 rank. At the same time, he became an upright official in the eyes of many people. Even the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, who looked up to Wen Tianxiang as a role model, had publicly praised him more than once, saying that there should be more Su Yozhen in the court to ensure that the governance of the officials was clean. For this reason, when Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the others were preparing to impeach Yang Chendong, they naturally found Su Yozhen. This was how Yang Chendong found out the news immediately and pointed the problem to Wang Wenyi. Is there such a thing? If that's the case, we'll just do what we need to do. Wang Wen was startled when he heard such a reason. If it was true, then with this reason, he could really make things difficult for Yang Chendong. However, what he couldn't understand was why Su Yozhen would reveal this matter to him in advance. The two of them didn't have any interactions before. Unable to understand Su Yozhen's intentions, Wang Wenyi simply pretended to be ignorant and acted as if he was doing official business. Seeing Wang Wenyi acting as if he was doing official business, Su Yozhen cursed in his heart for being B***tch, and still wanting to pretend to be chaste. However, his mouth didn't stop as he said, "Lord Wang, to be honest, this official has respected Eunuch Wang for a long time. If there is any opportunity to be of service to Eunuch Wang, this official will not hesitate to die 1,000 times. I know. How about this, if I don't pass on the news to you, then do what you should do." These words allowed Wang Wenyi to understand Su Yozhen's intentions. It seemed that this person also wanted to get on Wang Zhan's good side. No wonder he still came to pass on the news at such a late hour. Although he understood Su Yozhen's intentions, Wang Wenyi's power was limited and he didn't dare to make a decision for Wang Zhan. Thus, he used this method to reply to tell Su Yozhen that he was aware of her attitude towards Father Wang. However, whether or not he would accept her still depended on Eunuch Wang's opinion. Su Yozhen was a shrewd person and naturally understood the meaning behind the words. Immediately, her face lit up with joy. "Then I will have to trouble Lord Wang." As she spoke, she whispered. This official placed a box in front of Lord Wang's backyard. "Inside it is a token of my appreciation." Su Yozhen nodded without batting an eyelid, indicating that she understood. Immediately, she left the main room with satisfaction. Then, Wang Wenyi called for the housekeeper and asked him to bring in the box in the backyard. Not long after, he saw the neatly arranged 2,000 taels of silver in the box. These taels of silver were enough to cover several years of his salary. Wang Wenyi's face lit up with joy. "Come, change this official's robes. I want to see Father Wang." The capital had long been under a curfew, but for a third-rank official like Wang Wenyi, it was still extremely convenient for him to move around. This was especially so when he was Eunuch Wang Zhan's subordinate. This was already a public matter, so naturally, no one dared to block his sedan. However, he didn't know that in the darkness, there was a pair of eyes watching his every move. It wasn't until he entered the palace that the owner of that pair of eyes left quietly. In the morning court session, as Zhu Qizhen sat on the dragon throne, all of the military affairs of the country came crashing down on him like a surging wave. Fortunately, the matters discussed in the morning court session today were all good matters. For example, Deng Maoqi's rebellion in Fujian was basically over. Deng Maoqi was killed in the chaotic battle, and his henchmen were either killed, captured, or escaped. It would be difficult for them to cause any more trouble. Minister of War Kuang Yi had just finished speaking when Minister of Revenue Wang's was said that the potatoes had fully matured. The next step was to distribute the seeds. If the emperor did not have any special requests, then he would have a good talk with Yang Shima about the seed distribution. "We don't have any other requests. We just want the potatoes to mature as quickly as possible. Also, we have to prevent the potato seeds from flowing out. Teacher, for this matter, have the East Faction Guards and the Ironclad Guard keep a close eye on it." Ingzong recalled the warnings that the officials had given him and added on. "This official obeys. This old servant obeys." Wang Zhuo and Wang Zhan both agreed. Ingzong nodded and said, "What other matters do you have? Bring them all up. This official has a memorial." Following a shout, Sun Qing, Dong Kund, Su Yozhen, and the other 4 imperial censors all knelt on the ground. When an imperial censor stepped out, nothing good ever happened. The officials all frowned slightly when they saw this. Even Ingzong was a bit displeased. These imperial censors were always the type to wish for the world to be in chaos. Whenever they had something to report, it would always cause him to be displeased. However, this was still their duty, so no one could criticize them. For this reason, he could only do his best to remain calm and ask, "Dear officials, what matters do you have to report?" "Your Majesty, this official is impeaching the Crown Prince, Yang Chendong. Before the immortal abode opened for business, he gave membership cards to the families of all the officials of the third rank and above in the capital. The amount of money involved is extremely high, reaching several 100,000 taels." Imperial Censor Sun Qing reported loudly as he knelt on the ground. "Your Majesty, Yang Chendong is clearly trying to bribe the people. Your Majesty, please punish him," Imperial Censor Dong Kun said. "Your Majesty, this is a sign of forming a clique for personal gain. This official requests that Your Majesty immediately issue an order to arrest this guilty official, Yang Chendong, and issue an imperial edict to investigate this matter," Imperial Censor Lin Xiangfeng said as he kowtowed on the ground. "Your Majesty." The other imperial censors also began to criticize Yang Chendong. From their words, it was as if this crown prince was already an unpardonable criminal. Looking at the imperial censors kneeling on the ground one by one, Ingzong felt a headache coming on. He really couldn't understand. He was just a minor class 5 official. He didn't have any authority and didn't have any position. How could he be so disliked by others? Bribing the people's hearts? Forming a clique for personal gain? Was this really a rebellion? Ingzong didn't understand, but the other officials were furious. On the surface, they were criticizing Yang Chendong for bribery, but they were the ones who had taken the bribes. This was basically a net that had brought down a whole bunch of people. As a result, the faces of all the officials of the third rank and above in the imperial court turned ashen. Those with bad tempers could no longer suppress their anger. They began to criticize. "When did Yang Chendong give us money? He only gave us a membership card out of politeness. There was no money in that card." "That's right. There was only a card, but no money. How could it be called bribery?" The officials began to refute the imperial censors. Ingzong couldn't help but chuckle as he watched from his throne. It was rare for me to see an imperial censor infuriating the officials. Usually, when something like this happened, there would only be a few officials who were involved in it who would refute it. But today, when more than half of the officials opposed it, it was very rare. Ingzong viewed everything that was happening in front of him as a show. However, there were some people who didn't think that way. What they were thinking about was why there were people looking for trouble with Yang Chendong today after the immortal abode had opened for business yesterday. Who had they offended this time? If they hadn't offended anyone, why were there so many imperial censors standing out at the same time? It was obvious that someone had colluded with them beforehand. Otherwise, how could there be such a commotion? The imperial court was divided into 3 groups. One group was composed of the imperial censors who were criticizing Yang Chendong. The other group was composed of the officials who had been implicated. The last group was composed of officials whose ranks weren't high enough and weren't involved. They watched everything unfold in front of them as if they were watching a show. The officials retaliated, and the censors rebutted, saying that they were only speaking on behalf of Yang Chendong because they had received benefits. Truly, everyone had their reasons. Until one person walked out from the class seat, everyone's eyes fell on him at the same time. Chapter 105. Your Majesty, please allow this subject to report. As soon as this person appeared, he didn't even look at the imperial censors. Instead, he directly knelt on the ground and spoke to the emperor. "Beloved official, you has presented a memorial." Zhu Qizhen nodded as he looked at this left assistant minister of the Ministry of War Yu Qian, who was rumored to live a very poor life. He wanted to hear what he had to say. This person was precisely Yu Qian. Perhaps it was because of his incorruptibility that the imperial censors had a hard time finding fault with him. Now that he'd taken the initiative to speak up, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. Ignoring the gazes of his colleagues, Yu Qian spoke in a heavy voice. "Reporting to Your Majesty, this subject was fortunate enough to visit the immortal abode yesterday and witnessed its luxuriousness. At the same time, This subject also received a membership card for the immortal abode. Furthermore, this subject took the initiative to check it out and found that it was only a card with no silver inside. These words came from Yu Qian's mouth, and with his character, if he said he'd checked it out, then he must have. No one had any objections to this. Seeing that no one refuted him, Yu Qian continued, "This subject later found out that with this card, one can enjoy a discount when spending money in the immortal abode. Presumably, this is the only use of this card." As soon as he said this, Imperial Censor Sun Qing immediately chimed in, "That's right. This is the use of this card. If someone uses this card to spend money, they can save quite a bit of silver in one go. In the long run, won't the total amount reach tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of silver?" This is clearly Yang Chendong. Before Sun Qing could finish speaking, Yu Qian cut in, "Your Majesty, this subject believes that this matter cannot be settled like this. This subject has already said that this is only a card, and that it can only be used if one spends money. As for someone like this subject, my monthly salary is barely enough to support my family. Where would I find the money to spend in a place as luxurious as the immortal abode? As such, this card's existence is no different from a piece of scrap paper, completely meaningless. This subject believes that Your Majesty can ignore the words of the imperial censors and encourage the development of the immortal residence. A place like this that can enrich the entertainment of the common people should be encouraged by the country. Only when there are more immortals like this, the country's tax revenue will be more abundant. In the long run, the treasury will be full, which is a good thing for the country and the people." Yu Qian changed his usual self and took the initiative to speak up for Yang Chendong. First, everyone was a little puzzled. Could it be that this person also received some benefits from Yang Shima? Otherwise, why would he put in so much effort, not hesitating to directly insult the imperial censors? However, it wasn't until the last few sentences that everyone came to their senses. It seemed like this person's intentions were in vain. He had set his sights on the tax revenue after the immortal abode flourished. Originally, when Ingzong heard Yu Qian's words, he was also suspicious. Could it be that this civil official who called himself Wen Tianxiang really wanted to go with the flow and clear his name like the other officials? However, when he heard Yu Qian's words, he finally understood. He nodded and said, "Beloved Yu's words are reasonable. As the saying goes, only when the country is strong can the people live and work in peace and contentment. Teacher, I'll have to trouble you to investigate the immortal abode's income. Afterwards, the tax rate will be 30-1. During Rinxian's reign, the Great Ming dynasty was prosperous, and the treasury was full. However, after more than 10 years, Ingzong's hands had already begun to show signs of decline. For this reason, Zhu Qizhen had always been searching for a way to fill the treasury. Thus, the business tax became his goal. After seeing the prosperity of the immortal abode yesterday, Ingzong returned to the palace and immediately came up with the idea of collecting the business tax. For no other reason than the fact that as the emperor of the Great Ming dynasty, he couldn't even replace all the windows in the palace with glass. This made him feel a strong sense of defeat. In fact, Ingzong still had something he didn't say out loud. As the emperor of a country, he actually wasn't as capable as an official who was younger than him. Yang Chendong could cover the immortal abode with glass, but as the emperor of a country, he couldn't. Didn't this mean that he wasn't even as good as an official? This was what he found hard to accept. Today, Yu Qian just so happened to mention that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. How could Ingzong be polite? He agreed in person and sent his most trusted teacher, Wang Zhen, to carry out this task. In Zhu Qizhen's heart, Wang Zhen was one of his own. If he was sent to carry out this task, he definitely wouldn't treat him unfairly. Wang Zhen hadn't expected this kind of result. Last night, Wang Wenyi had found him and reported this matter, but he hadn't taken it to heart. Even though he had the power and influence to nip everything in the bud, he hadn't done so. He'd also witnessed the prosperity of the immortal abode and saw its potential. He was also afraid that Yang Chendong would grow too big and become a threat to him. That was why he'd wanted to use the imperial censor to warn the sixth young master. Wang Zhen had long thought that this kind of impeachment wouldn't be of much use. It involved all of the third-rank and above officials in the capital. Even if he didn't do anything himself, these people alone would be enough to stop the imperial censor's mouth. What he hadn't expected was that Yu Qian would take the initiative to jump out and say that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. This caught him completely off guard. Fortunately, this matter still had to go through his hands. This became a bargaining chip in his negotiations with Yang Qindong. After witnessing the prosperity of the immortal abode, Wang Zhen was no longer satisfied with the 10% they'd agreed on. Yu Qian's sudden interruption caused the imperial censor's impeachment to fail. However, it seemed like there was no victor because the immortal abode had to pay the tax and pay the price. In the end, the court assembly dispersed. The imperial censors left under the warning gazes of the officials. Not long after, Wang Zhen also left the palace, heading straight for the Yang Manor 15 li south of the city. Before leaving, Su Yozhen had already reported the situation of today's morning court assembly to the Bureau of Security. At that moment, Yang Qindong was in his study, looking at the report Tiger's Mane had sent over regarding today's morning court assembly. Because of Yu Qian's appearance, the outcome of what had originally been a muddled case had actually turned against him. He couldn't help but laugh in anger. This Yu Qian isn't fun at all. He's far from being as cute as that smoking, drinking, and perming guy from the future. Young master, what perming? Xiao Yin, who was serving him from the side, inadvertently overheard this and couldn't help but ask curiously. Aha, it's nothing. The young master was just thinking about some things and was just talking to himself. Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh. Soon after, his expression became calm again. Yu Qian was a capable, talented, and upright official. What was even more rare was that this kind of person cared more about the people and not the king. Otherwise, in history, Zhu Qizhen wouldn't have been captured and he wouldn't have loudly said, "We are completely thinking for the country and not for ourselves." Then Zhu Qiu, the successor patriarch, wouldn't have ascended to the throne. He wasn't blindly loyal and was talented. If this kind of person came to Qiqian City, he would definitely be of great help to the new army and the new city's development. Yang Qindong liked talent. He knew what he needed to do. But as for Yu Qian, although he liked him, he also knew that now wasn't the time to recruit him. Even if he tried to recruit him, it would never work. If he wanted to be used by him, he could only use force. How would he use force? When would he use force? This was what Yang Qindong needed to consider. Forget it. Since you don't want to be an assistant minister, then I'll fulfill your wish. He smiled. He had already thought of a way to solve Yu Qian's problem, and it would be done once and for all. With a rough idea in mind, Yang Qindong began to consider the issue of taxation. When it came to doing business, paying taxes was a matter of course. However, this was not the case in the Ming dynasty. They didn't collect taxes from officials, eunuchs, or scholars. These three didn't just refer to business taxes, but agricultural taxes as well. This made the rich and powerful even richer. The commoners had to work hard for an entire year, but they couldn't even afford to buy food and clothing. With such a trend, the Ming dynasty's treasury became poorer and poorer. Yang Qindong understood this principle, which was why he used his status to open the immortal abode. Just by avoiding taxes, he could save a lot of money in a year. But he hadn't expected that Ing Zong would suddenly use Yu Qian to make such a move, catching him off guard. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because of his appearance that Ing Zong's thoughts had changed. If that was the case, then it wasn't a good thing. Yang Qindong wasn't a god, so he naturally had no way of knowing what kind of psychological changes Ing Zong would experience. However, there was one thing he had to take care of, and that was the issue of the immortal abode's taxes. Since the emperor had brought it up in court, it would be quite troublesome to avoid paying. How to reduce the amount of taxes needed to be considered. Fortunately, this matter had been left to Wang Zhen. If it had been left to Yu Qian, it would have been a real headache. However, even Wang Zhen was someone who ate people without spitting out their bones. He had to carefully consider how to deal with him. Outside the Yang clan manor, Wang Zhen had arrived. He had his own carriage, and there wasn't a single member of the embroidered uniform guard or the Eastern faction guards that didn't recognize him. When the carriage approached, a group of people knelt on the ground. Wang Jin had long since gotten used to this kind of situation. He didn't even get out of the carriage and directly drove towards the Yang clan manor's inner courtyard. Right now, the potato harvest was about to begin. Anyone who entered the Yang clan manor had to be strictly checked. Only someone of Wang Jun's status could act so unbridled. The carriage continued forward until it reached the Yang clan manor's courtyard. When they didn't see Yang Qindong's figure, the embroidered uniform guard commander Chen Shi, who was also Wang Jun's nephew, Wang Lin, arrogantly said, "What's wrong? You're just washing a horse. Why are you putting on such airs? Could it be that you don't know how to come out and welcome us?" The two servants, Yang Wu and Yang Lu, who were secretly paying attention to the movements in front of the courtyard, had sullen expressions on their faces. Their fists gradually clenched as they reached for their pistols by their waists. It was only a distance of 20 steps. They were confident that they could take the life of the person who shouted with a hook of their fingers. Chapter 106. Ha ha ha. I didn't know that Eunuch Wang would grace me with his presence. Forgive me for being late. A boisterous laugh rang out as Yang Qindong strode to the entrance of the courtyard. Ha ha. My Yang Xianji is too polite. How could this eunuch not feel embarrassed? Wang Jun, dressed in the robes of a eunuch, stepped out of the carriage and walked over to Yang Qindong. Yang Qindong's smile was the type that hid a knife in his sleeve, but Wang Jun's smile was also the type that didn't reach his eyes. In the end, the two of them had only come together temporarily for the sake of mutual benefits. They couldn't even be considered allies, so how could they show their sincerity? Yang Qindong bowed and politely said, "Eunuch Wang, please." "Sixth young master, please." Wang Jun heartily laughed and led the way forward, pulling Yang Qindong 2 steps behind. It was as if he was saying that this was his residence, not the Yang clan manor. Once the host and guest were seated in the main hall, a very ordinary servant brought 2 cups of tea before bowing and retreating. Whenever Yang Qindong's guests came, Xiaoyin would bring them tea, but Wang Jun didn't even get to enjoy this treatment. From this, one could see that in the eyes of the 6th young master, this person wasn't even worth an ordinary guest. Wang Jun naturally didn't know about the Yang clan manor. The Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard had countless spies, and many of the important officials of the capital were under surveillance. However, this didn't include Yang Qindong. Not being qualified was one thing, but this place was already surrounded by spies, so there was no need to keep an eye on them. The tea is not bad. It's much better than the last time. Looks like the 6th young master has earned quite a bit of money. Wang Jun said with a fake smile after dipping his lips into the tea as if it was for show. Yang Qindong knew that Wang Jun was reminding him, so he smiled and said, "You're too kind. This is all thanks to Eunuch Wang's good fortune. Of course, Eunuch Wang has a share of the immortal abode's income." Ai. Wang Jun let out a long sigh, as if depressed. He glanced at Yang Qindong out of the corner of his eye, then fell silent. His expression seemed to be saying, "Hurry up and ask me why I'm sighing." How could Yang Qindong not know what Wang Jun meant when he pretended to be depressed? Since he was going to put on an act, of course he had to go all the way. He immediately went along with the other party's wishes and asked curiously, "Why is Eunuch sighing?" After a moment's silence, Wang Jun finally spoke. Eunuch Wang, yesterday's, Wang Jun's. You didn't know that there were people because you teat yours. 8. Teat know that. T's eunuch. Of such teat which bastard can't bear to see others doing well and came up with such a despicable idea. I curse him to die a horrible death. Yang Qindong flew into a rage. His usual gentlemanly demeanor was nowhere to be found. He stood up from his chair and began cursing. She scolded Wang Jun to the point that he frowned. He thought to himself, where does this look like someone who is well-read? This is clearly one of those unreasonable shrews. Wang Jun listened to Yang Qindong's cursing for a good while. Then, as if he was tired, he sat back down in his chair, panting. "Eunuch Wang, tell me who did it. I'll buy his life with silver." His words were spoken in an imposing manner. In reality, Yang Chendong was indeed very rich. He'd earned over 2 million taels of silver from the Immortal Abode's membership cards alone, and that wasn't even counting the people who'd be applying for membership cards soon. There were a few people who'd been waiting to see if the Immortal Abode was as good as they'd been described. After yesterday's events, these people probably wouldn't hesitate any longer. Wouldn't the money still roll in? With money, Yang Chendong's words naturally became much more confident. Now that he'd dared to say that he'd buy his life with money, it made sense. At the very least, it suited his current mood. Seeing Yang Chendong so angry that he'd even go so far as to say that he'd buy his life with money, Wang Zhen couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Youngsters are youngsters, after all. They can't keep their cool. One had to understand that these words were already quite a bit of leverage. Even if Wang Zhen used these words to arrest Yang Chendong, the other officials wouldn't be able to say anything. However, Yang Chendong still had a use for him, so he might as well keep his life for now. Since he was a fat sheep, the fatter it was, the more meat he'd get when slaughtered. Ai. Wang Zhen let out another long sigh. His tone was earnest, as if he were an elder lecturing a junior. "Sixth young master, you shouldn't be so impulsive. Not everything can be solved with silver. Alright, you don't need to worry. This duke has already taken care of the matters in the morning court." Taken care of? Yang Chendong pretended to be extremely shocked. At first, he was dumbfounded. Then, as if he'd understood something, he laughed heartily. "That's right. How could I have forgotten about father-in-law? With father-in-law's abilities, wouldn't resolving such a small matter be a piece of cake?" When Wang Zhen saw that Yang Chendong was about to start flattering him, he was worried that he'd continue to nag for a long time. He hurriedly waved his hands and said, "The matter of your impeachment has been resolved. However, the current emperor has also issued an imperial edict that the Immortal Abode must pay taxes. He's even delegated this task to this duke. Sixth young master, what do you think we should do?" Yang Chendong, who just calmed down, immediately jumped to his feet when he heard the words taxes. Taxes? Why? The other officials don't have to pay taxes. Even those who haven't yet become officials don't have to pay taxes. This young master is still a 5th-rank official, isn't he? Why should I pay taxes? I'm not paying. Yang Chendong's face was completely that of a scoundrel. When Wang Zhen saw all of this, his evaluation of Yang Chendong in his heart became even lower. Wasn't this person supposed to do great things? How did this Immortal Abode manage to come up with so many tricks? Wang Zhen felt a bit of disdain in his heart, but he didn't let it show on his face. On the contrary, he put on a look of concern for Yang Chendong. "This is an imperial edict from His Majesty. Why don't you pay some taxes first?" "Do I really have to pay them?" When he heard the words His Majesty, Yang Chendong seemed to calm down a lot. However, he leaned forward and said in a quiet voice, "Father-in-law, you also have shares in the Immortal Abode. If you have to pay taxes, then you'll have to share in father-in-law's profits as well." I only have 10%. It's nothing much. Even if I have to split it, I probably won't get much. Wang Zhen acted as if he didn't care at all. He really didn't seem to care. But Yang Chendong knew that after so many years of monopolizing power, Wang Zhen had long since developed a habit of doing everything he wanted. When it came to splitting his wealth, he probably wouldn't even ask for a single copper coin less. Similarly, once money entered his pocket, he probably wouldn't be willing to part with it if he couldn't take it out. The only reason he said this was because he wanted to fish for more benefits. Knowing the other party's temperament was the same as knowing his trump card. Yang Chendong sighed and said, "Fine. Since this is His Majesty's wish, then this subject will pay. However, this way, father-in-law's monthly income will be much less." He had originally been immensely pleased with himself, waiting to see what kind of price Yang Chendong would pay to refuse to pay the taxes. However, he didn't expect that Yang Chendong would actually cower and agree. What was the meaning of this? This script was completely different from what he had imagined. At this moment, it was Wang Zhen who was put in a difficult position. If he really had to pay the taxes, he would naturally have to share his benefits. Just as Yang Chendong thought, for a person with such great power, he would always be the one to receive benefits. How could he possibly push the benefits away? No, you can pay the taxes, but you can't give me a share. Of course, I will take a little bit less as a token of appreciation. Wang Zhen's reaction was extremely fast. In just a few breaths of time, he had thought of a countermeasure and expressed his thoughts. Yang Chendong pretended to be shocked as he looked at Wang Zhen. Soon after, he stuttered, "Eunuch means that your share won't change? Then how will it be calculated? This tax will definitely be deducted from the general account. No matter, I'll split my share first. The rest will be taxed according to the ratio." Wang Zhen's eyes narrowed as he spoke with a smile, as if he was talking about something insignificant. Yang Chendong cursed Wang Zhen's greed inwardly. He put on a troubled expression and replied, "But if we do that, it will affect the operations of the sky beyond heaven. I won't hide it from father-in-law. Originally, I was planning to use the Immortal Abode's income to purchase goods for the Sky Beyond Heaven Trading Company. You also know that glass and mirrors are all very expensive. Without sufficient funds, it's impossible to do anything. And if we succeed, we'll earn mountains of gold and silver. At that time, I was even prepared to give father-in-law 40% of the profits. Sai, I'm afraid that once we pay the taxes, we won't have enough funds." He shook his head bitterly as he slammed his palms on the table, as if he really had missed out on something good. Wait a moment. Wang Zhen originally had a cold expression, waiting for Yang Chendong to take the initiative to give him some benefits. However, when he heard that 40% of the profits would be given, his expression immediately changed. He could no longer maintain his previous calm. "Sixth young master, what did you just say? 40%? That's right. 40%. Yang Chendong nodded with an expression that said it was indeed so. Then he added, "Of course, this is under the condition that there is a large amount of available funds. For example, if Eunuch Wang can lend me 2 million taels of silver, in addition to the fact that I don't have to worry about taxes, it is reasonable to take out 40% of the benefits. Unfortunately, since even His Majesty has issued a decree, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult to fulfill." An extremely regretful expression appeared on his face, as if all the beautiful things had vanished into thin air. Chapter 107. No, didn't this Duke say it already? His Majesty left everything in my hands, so this Duke is naturally the one making the decisions. Everything can be discussed. Enough benefits were enough to drive someone crazy. Wang Zhen finally couldn't remain calm under the temptation of 40% of benefits. His expression was no longer as aloof as before. Instead, it was one of deep concern. "I just don't know how much this 40% will bring me in a month. If we really get 2 million taels of silver, then after a year, the Immortal Abode and Sky Beyond Heaven's monthly profits should be 40% should be around 100,000 taels, right?" Yang Chendong muttered to himself as he counted on his fingers. Then, he gave Wang Zhen an extremely accurate number. Wang Zhen's left eye twitched when he heard that he could get 100,000 taels of silver in a month. This number was already more than what he could get from all the other businesses combined. Didn't that mean that as long as he had Yang Chendong's support, he would have an endless supply of money to spend? He could do as many things as he wanted. Of course, Wang Zhen also knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If he wanted to achieve this, he would have to pay a great price. At the very least, he would have to fork out 2 million taels of silver right now. The question was, did Wang Zhen have it? The answer was obvious. Of course he did. After all these years of plundering and poking around, he had already accumulated quite a bit of savings. Even though he was still a bit short of 2 million taels of silver, with his charisma, he would be able to quickly make up for it. Then, should he give it to Yang Chendong? Or should he trust him? Wang Zhen was deep in thought as he considered the feasibility of this step. Yang Chendong looked like he was regretting something with his head lowered, but in reality, He had been watching this arrogant fellow from the corner of his eye. When he saw that he seemed to be thinking about something, he decided to add fuel to the fire. He immediately took the initiative to say, "Eunuch, you don't think that 100,000 taels of silver a month is impossible to achieve, right? Let me tell you, we've only seen the immortal abode. Relying on it won't work. However, once heavens beyond opens for business, the benefits will be unimaginable. This is because the things we sell are not even available in the Ming dynasty. Small items such as soap, toilet paper, diapers, toothbrushes, toothpaste, perfume, various kinds of canned fish, chongsam, and various kinds of women's underwear. Large items such as glass, various kinds of exquisite glass cups, and even the divine mirror in the palace can be bought as long as one is willing to spend money. Think about it, these items are only available to grandmasters. Wouldn't the price be decided by us? I'm afraid that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver." Wang Zhen had been listening attentively. Most of the things mentioned earlier were things that he had only heard of recently. Once they were circulated in the market, they would undoubtedly be popular goods. When he heard that there was even a godly item for sale, he was completely relieved. He was very optimistic about the future of sky beyond heaven. When Yang Qindong mentioned that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver, it was Wang Zhen's turn to slap the table and say, "Fine, then 200,000 taels of silver a month it is. This duke can guarantee that no taxes will be collected, and will also inject 2 million taels of silver into sky beyond heaven and the immortal abode. After a year, you will return the 2 million taels of silver to me, and at the same time, give me a monthly profit of 200,000 taels." Wang Zhen's tone was extremely resolute, as if he had made a decision. He was like a gambler. After he finished speaking, his eyes, which were slightly red from excitement, fell on Yang Qindong, as if waiting for his reply. "That's not a problem." Yang Qindong saw that the wolf had fallen into the trap. How could he hesitate in the slightest? Not only did he immediately agree, he even said that he could immediately sign a contract. If he couldn't, then the immortal abode and sky beyond heaven would all belong to Wang Zhen. Seeing Yang Qindong so confident, Wang Zhen was completely relieved. Whether it was the immortal abode or sky beyond heaven, they were both the sixth young master's painstaking efforts. If he dared to bet even that, then he was naturally trustworthy. Ha ha ha, Dong Shuai is indeed a straightforward person. Since that's the case, then you just need to sign the contract and wait for my 2 million taels of silver to enter your account. Wang Zhen was so happy that he even called out Dong Shuai's name. From Yang Shima to the sixth young master to the current Dong Shuai, it was clear that Wang Zhen's impression of Yang Qindong was changing step by step. His impression of him was growing with each passing day. Speaking of which, Wang Zhen was only blindly taking money. Even if something happened to the immortal abode, he would only receive a little less income. It wouldn't hurt him at all. But now that was no longer the case. If he invested 2 million taels of silver, then he would have to pay a price. Whether it was the immortal abode or sky beyond heaven, they would all become part of his businesses. How could he afford to be careless or sloppy? As for Yang Qindong, Crimson City's development speed was unimaginable. After conquering Flag Mountain in the southwest of Ryukyu Island, there was nothing to worry about. It was only a matter of time before they could fully develop. Add to that the strength of the Navy, and the amount of protection fees they collected every day could be described as 10,000 taels of silver a day. He really didn't lack this 2 million taels of silver, but he still forced Wang Zhen to spend so much money. He just wanted him to face this problem head-on, and put in more effort. Now that Wang Zhen was willing to fork out 2 million taels of silver, it proved that he had invested a lot. He definitely wouldn't allow anything to happen to his businesses. This was what Yang Qindong wanted to see. As for the 200,000 taels of silver a year from now, haha, Wang Zhen would have to live until then for that to happen. The two of them really hit it off, and the matter was settled just like that. When they drank the tea, it seemed to have become much more fragrant. Seeing that Wang Zhen seemed to be in a good mood, Yang Qindong took the opportunity to raise two questions. The first was about who had caused this morning's incident. If they didn't find the mastermind behind it, there would likely be more of this kind of trouble in the future. They couldn't just passively take a beating, could they? The second question was about Yu Qian. He had proposed that the immortal abode pay taxes. Although this matter had been handed over to Wang Jin, and there wasn't much of a problem as long as he lived, he would have to keep an eye on them. Wouldn't that mean that they would have to guard against thieves for 1,000 days? Presumably, everyone would be in a lot of pain. Since he had reached an agreement with Yang Qindong, and had even given him a large sum of money, there were some things that Wang Jun naturally wouldn't hide from him. He had his own thoughts on these two matters, and told the sixth young master about them. I've already investigated the matter. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the other censors impeaching you was Shishang's doing behind the scenes. He was the one who leaked the news to the censors. These people have their responsibilities, so of course they would take action now that they have an excuse. Wang Jun shook his head lightly as he spoke, a look of resentment on his face. Last time, Shishang had slashed Yang Qindong with a blade. Originally, he should have been punished, and it wouldn't have been excessive even if he had been killed. However, it was precisely because of him that the sixth young master didn't pursue the matter. At that time, he had even promised that the two of them wouldn't interfere with each other's business in the future. But now he had already made a move. Wasn't this the same as slapping him, the middleman, in the face? Yang Qindong's expression changed. He had already investigated the ins and outs of the matter last night, and now, he had thrown the question to Wang Jun in order to hide it. Now he acted as if this was the first time he had heard of such a matter, and said angrily, "This Shishang is really too much of a bully." Yang Qindong's anger was within Wang Zhan's expectations, so he wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he comforted him, "Dong Shuai, this matter isn't just a slap to your face. It is also a slap to this duke's face. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation for this matter. This guild will arrange and persuade Shishang to leave the capital. What do you think?" "Leave the capital?" Yang Qindong pretended to be puzzled as he asked. "Yes, leave the capital. Shishang's position is that of 1,000 households of the embroidered uniform guard, and he will use this as an excuse to monitor the officials outside the capital. As for when he will return, we'll decide based on his performance, all right?" Wang Jun said with a smile, as if he was negotiating with Wang Jin. Leaving the capital was naturally to toss out the problem and not cause trouble for the immortal abode and realm beyond heaven. As for when he would return, that would depend on Yang Qindong's performance. If he performed well and the two sides were satisfied with the cooperation, then he naturally wouldn't return to the capital. But if Yang Qindong wanted to play some tricks, then he would just summon him back, and Wang Jun would just have to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Wang Jun thought that he had a shrewd plan, but he didn't know that this was exactly what Yang Qindong was thinking. Shishang was a member of the embroidered uniform guard, and he also had a powerful eunuch brother like Xining. Making a move against him in the capital would naturally cause a great deal of trouble, and Yang Qindong would find it difficult to make a move against him. But things were different outside the capital. The heavens were high and the emperor was far away, so it was perfectly normal for something to happen to anyone. "All right, then let's do as eunuch says." Yang Qindong appeared to be in deep thought as he nodded his head in agreement. "And the second problem? How do you want to deal with Yu Qian? This person is a tough nut to crack. I won't hide it from you, Dong Shuai." This duke had wanted to deal with him before, but he was unmoved by force or persuasion. As an official, he is extremely honest. Moreover, there are many people who are willing to speak up for him. This has given this duke quite a headache. As he spoke, he rubbed his forehead. Wang Jin truly didn't know what to do with Yu Qian. Yang Qindong had naturally heard about how Wang Jun had captured Yu Qian and imprisoned him, only to be helplessly released later from the Bureau of Security. He naturally knew that Wang Jun wasn't trying to shirk responsibility, but that he truly had no other choice. Thus, he nodded, then pretended to have suddenly thought of something. "Since Yu Qian can't do anything to him in the capital, why don't we just send him out of the capital like we did with Shishang? Isn't he the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel? Have someone investigate the situation of the various guard stations in the country. This way, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Chapter 108. Upon hearing Yang Qindong's idea, Wang Zhen's eyes lit up. Not bad. This is a good idea. But he'll still come back in the end. Wang Zhen lightly shook his head when he realized that this wasn't a permanent solution. It's fine. He'll leave one day at a time, and who knows what kind of situation he'll be in when he returns. When that time comes, we'll think of something else. After all, if we make a move against him now, it will implicate too many people and cause too much trouble, Yang Qindong said, appearing to fear Yu Qian very much. These words were precisely what Wang Zhen was worried about. He was also afraid of Yu Qian, or else he would have made a move long ago. Thinking that there was truly no better idea at the moment and that sending Yu Qian away would be a way to alleviate the situation, Wang Zhen nodded. Okay, let's do as you say. The atmosphere of this second official meeting was much better than the first. When Wang Zhen decided to invest 2 million taels of silver, he had completely stepped onto Yang Qindong's boat. The only difference was that he was the one on the boat, and this was tantamount to placing his life in the other party's hands. It was just that he was completely unaware of it. In the end, Wang Zhen left the Yang clan manor in satisfaction. Not long after, Yu Qian and Xishang were transferred out of the capital. At the same time, the 2 million taels of silver were sent in batches to the newly opened Heavens Beyond Trading Company. There was already a dazzling array of goods here. There were many goods in Heavens Beyond, and they were constantly being shipped in from Crimson City. But when they were operating, they would always tell the merchants who came to purchase that there was a shortage of goods. So they had no choice but to sell in limited quantities. The purpose of this so-called limited quantity was to trick the eager consumers into buying, or else there would be no more. In other words, there wasn't enough supply, and there would be a mad scramble. In other words, there was a limit to how many goods could be sold each day. For example, glass. Each piece was 6 by 6, and only 1,000 pieces could be sold each day. The price was set by the highest bidder, and the items would be sold to the highest bidder. As for the others, they would have to wait until the next day. There were also glass cups, perfume, toilet paper, and other items. They were limited every day, so there were always a lot of people who needed them. There were very few goods, which made everything a hot commodity. And all of this followed the principle of bidding, the highest bidder wins. There were also divine items like mirrors, which were not only limited in quantity, but would only appear once every 3 days. Because of this, countless merchants fought over them, and there were also many people who tried to establish relations with the Yang family. Things like getting in through the back door happened from time to time. Since ancient times, sellers had always set the standard of being able to sell their goods. In fact, the more they sold, the better it would be. However, those who came to collect their goods would always sell them at a lower price. However, when they reached the Heavens Beyond Heaven, they did the exact opposite. Do you want the goods? Then he would just offer a high price. Do you want more goods? Not only was there no discount on the price, but on the contrary, the price might be even higher. It was not impossible to monopolize the market, but one would need sufficient funds to do so. It must be said that when the Heavens Beyond Heaven played this game, many merchants hated it, but there was nothing they could do. Outside the Heavens Beyond Heaven, there were always the figures of the Eastern Faction Guards and the Brocade Guards. If someone dared to cause trouble, they would immediately be arrested. If they did not pay a large sum of hard-earned money, they would not be able to leave. The merchants did not dare to cause trouble, and could only play according to the rules of the Heavens Beyond Heaven. As a result, a large amount of gold and silver flowed into the hands of Yang Qindong, and his funds became incomparably huge. Now, when he received goods from the Tianjin Wayport, the receiver was also responsible for the task of delivering the money. It was really a pleasure. There were also some merchants who, seeing the Heavens Beyond Heaven making so much money, gave birth to other thoughts. They wanted to get their own ships to travel the sea. Although there were some risks, if they succeeded and brought back the foreign goods, they would definitely make a fortune. However, how could they know that the great Ming Dynasty's sea region had already been taken over by Yang Qindong? Those merchant ships that went out to buy goods were often intercepted by Gao Xiong's navy not long after they left the sea. Then, they would be captured along with the money. That was truly a profitable business. Just from this, who knew how much Yang Chendong had earned? In truth, the order to seal off the sea region was given by Yang Chendong, but Gao Xiong himself was not the one who carried it out. Gao Xiong had long lost interest in dealing with the unarmed and defenseless Ming dynasty merchants, and handed these matters to his assistant Yu Guang. He was together with Leng Song, discussing the matter of attacking Deer Port. After taking down Qishan and dealing with the threat at the southwest rear of Qiqian City, the Yang family's new army took over Mount Ali and Mount Yu, taking over a large portion of Taichung. They also suppressed the enemy's forces near Taichung, and Deer Port became the first military stronghold facing the front lines. Deer Port. It was the biggest port in the entire Little Ryukyu country. The terrain here was great, and the coastline was also really smooth, allowing large numbers of ships to be parked there. Furthermore, its location was close to the Little Ryukyu Ocean region, making it difficult for others to suddenly attack. As such, it became a natural harbor base. As the highest-ranking officer of the new army, Gao Xiong had been drooling over this place and wanted to take it for himself. If not for the fact that they lacked manpower, he would have had such thoughts long ago. Now that Deng Maoqi and Fujian had been killed, and the uprising army there was suppressed by the Ming army, Leng Song, who was unable to take advantage of the situation, could only bring his men back to Qiqian City. This allowed the military power in the city to be strengthened. Leng Song's gains from the Fujian trip were huge. The 100 Leng vanguard and 500 support troops that he brought won many battles. In the end, no one died, and only 7 were injured. Moreover, their injuries were not serious. They did not have many casualties, and this was naturally due to the hard work and strictness of their training. After a few months of hard work, the results were also gratifying. They brought back more than 150,000 people from the Great Ming Dynasty, and they obtained countless resources such as gunpowder. With the addition of these Han Chinese, the problem of manpower was alleviated to a certain extent. After another serious and strict examination, He Yang, Song Deshang, and the other instructors did not dare to go easy on them. Every support soldier that wanted to officially become a member of the Leng Vanguard had to go through both physical and cultural tests. Only when their results were good or above could they become a regular soldier. However, because there were too many people waiting to be selected, the number of people who passed the examination this time was even more than the previous times combined. There were actually more than 600 people who passed the final examination. With so many new Leng Vanguard joining at once, Gao Xiong and Leng Song discussed and expanded the army, forming a total of 12 companies, with 100 people in each company. These people were then divided into 4 battalions, with 2 battalions for the Navy and the Army, making 6 companies. With the expansion of the Leng Vanguard, Gao Xiong and Leng Song's horizons were broadened, and they set their sights on Deer Harbor. They wanted to deal with the problem of Taichung in one go and deal a heavy blow to the number 1 Shang dynasty. Now that they had a target, what came next was all sorts of investigations and infiltrations. According to the teachings of the 6th young master, before every battle, the most mature performance was to understand everything about the enemy. If there was enough time, it was best to know who the enemy's commander was. What kind of personality they had, what kind of fighting style they would use, had to be understood clearly. Only then could they achieve the greatest victory with the smallest price. Yang Chendong's words had always been treated as the truth in the new army. The investigations began, and the battle plan to attack Deer Harbor began to take shape. Xisheng left, and so did Yu Qian. In the capital, Yang Chendong seemed to have calmed down a lot after the departure of the two. All he could see were the guests of the immortal abode and the merchants of the realm beyond heaven. For the time being, Yang Chendong didn't pay too much attention to these things that he had been preparing for a long time. He knew that as long as everything went according to plan, he would definitely earn enough money and gain enough popularity. Since he didn't need to spend too much effort on these things, what came next was to deal with those people who had caused trouble for him. In the study of the 6th young master of the Yang clan manor, there were 3 pieces of paper. These were 3 sets of information sent over by the Bureau of Security. They were information on the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel Yu Qian, 1000 Commander Shi Shang of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, and Imperial Censor Shen Yu of the Sichuan Dao. What Yang Chundong didn't expect was that not only did Wang Jin chase Yu Qian and Shi Shang out of the capital, he even chased Shen Yu of the Sichuan Dao, who had returned to the capital to report on his work. These two are talents. If you want to keep them, send them to Crimson City. Tell Gao Xiong and Leng Song to arrange for people to keep an eye on them 24 hours a day. They can go and see everything, but they can't leave or do anything. After handing over the information on Yu Qian and Shen Yu to Tiger's Mane, Yang Chindong's expression hardened. He looked at the information on Shishang on the last piece of paper and said, "As for this person, take care of him on the spot, but do it cleanly, and no one can see any problems. Can you do it?" "Yes," Tiger's Mane excitedly replied. Then he leaned forward and asked, "Young master, can I personally take care of this matter?" "No." Yang Chundong decisively shook his head. "You are this young master's subordinate. Everyone knows that. If you disappear at this time, people will inevitably become suspicious. How about this? Let Dao Zhao's group take care of this matter. Don't they complain every day that they have nothing to do? If this matter fails, then they can just return to Crimson City and become a supporting soldier. If they want to join the Cold Front, they will have to face even more difficult and stringent tests." Seeing how straightforward Yang Chindong was, Tiger's Mane knew that there was no chance for him to take advantage of this matter. He immediately stood at attention and replied, "Young master, please rest assured, this matter will be handled beautifully." Chapter 109. Nanjing's Yangzhou Prefecture. As the capital of the Ming Dynasty and now a subsidiary capital, this place was still bustling with activity. Moreover, the climate was pleasant. So much of the Ming Dynasty's wealth had been gathered here. Yangzhou Prefecture was the most prosperous of all places. Not only were there all sorts of goods, but because the heavens were high and the emperor was far away, the entertainment industry was also very developed. Shi Shang and his 10 brothers were enjoying themselves here. He had originally wanted to annoy Yang Chindong a little, so he had his brothers send a message to the imperial censors. This had led to the impeachment of Yang Chindong in the imperial court, which had led to the emperor imposing taxes on the immortal abode, allowing him to vent some of his anger. But soon after, he suffered the consequences of his own actions. Because he had acted on his own initiative, he had incurred the wrath of Wang Jin. He had left the capital this time to avoid the storm. In his big brother's words, he should leave the capital and have some fun. Once he was tired and the capital was calm, he would naturally be called back. Knowing that this was the result of his big brother's compromise with Wang Zhan, Shisheng obediently left the capital and came to Yangzhou, a place of pleasant weather and romance. As soon as he entered this place, Shisheng had the feeling of a dragon entering the sea. He brought a dozen brothers to eat and drink every day, which was very comfortable. At night, he would find a very famous local flower to sleep. It was really like being a groom every day, living like an immortal. But all of this would come to an end tonight, because Dao Xiao had personally come, and with him were 3 of Lengfeng's brothers. All of them were extremely skilled in firearms. Dao Xiao had taken on 3 missions this time: kill Shishang, capture Yu Qian, and capture Shen Yu. He had assigned 3 of his brothers to each of the last 2 missions. Yu Qian was just a scholar without the strength to truss a chicken, so sending 3 of his brothers was already giving them face. As for Shishang's mission, he had to do it himself. Although Shishang had injured the 6th young master, which had been part of the plan, the guards had still been dissatisfied. Based on what they had said, if anyone offended the 6th young master, they should just kill them. What was the point of trying to injure themselves to gain the enemy's confidence? However, this was an order personally given by the 6th young master. As soldiers, it was their duty to obey orders, so there was nothing they could say. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he let Shishang go so easily? After entering Yangzhou, he quickly met up with the person in charge of the security bureau. After finding out where Shishang was going tonight and which entertainer he had taken a fancy to, Dao Xiao quickly started making plans. In Dao Zhao's words, since this brat likes women so much, then let him die on a woman's belly. With a general direction in mind, the next step was to make various preparations, as well as various disguises and infiltrations. He had experienced this many times in the past when he entered the Cold Peak trial, so naturally he was extremely familiar with it. Very quickly, one of his subordinates took on the role of a pimp, another was in charge of keeping watch, and another was in charge of receiving and retreating. Naturally, the matter of attacking Xisheng was left to Dao Xiao. He was playing with a bottle of medicine in his hand. These were all aphrodisiacs. After taking them, even if he was facing a Sao, he would not be able to control himself. He wanted to see Xisheng's wonderful performance tonight. The sky was dark. As expected, Xisheng led a group of subordinates into the ambush that Dao Xiao had prepared beforehand. Once he entered, he could not wait to find the room of the star of the place, the lady called Cai Tianxian, and walked in. However, the moment he entered the room, a pimp followed behind him. At this moment, Xisheng was anxiously taking off his clothes and was about to get on the bed to wait for the lady's arrival. Suddenly, he heard movement behind him, and the footsteps did not belong to a lady. Out of habit, he drew his spring-embroidered saber. "Dear customer, don't be nervous. I'm here to give you medicine. After taking these things, I guarantee that you will be more energetic. A night as a bridegroom only costs 1 tael of silver. It's cheap, right?" The pimp did not show any fear when facing Xisheng, who was holding a saber. Instead, he walked forward to promote the things in his hands. Originally, when he saw that it was a pimp who came in, Xisheng thought that he was too nervous. Especially when he heard that the other party was promoting pills, he did not take the other party seriously. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Get out of here. This young master's body is very good. I don't need those things." The pimp should have left after he finished speaking. However, he did not expect that the other party would take another step forward. At the same time, he kept saying, "Dear customer, my medicine is really good. If you don't try it, you'll regret it. Get out." Seeing that the pimp was actually getting closer to him, Xisheng was a little angry. The other party had disturbed his elegance. Even if he killed the other party here, it would not be a big deal. It would just be a lowly record. After he killed the other party, he would just have to report it to the local authorities. The spring-embroidered saber was raised high, as if it would fall at any time. However, the pimp standing opposite him was not afraid at all. Instead, he opened his mouth and said, "Dear customer, you are being unreasonable. I brought you something out of kindness. If you don't want it, just don't want it. Why do you have to fight?" The pimp's calmness gave Xisheng a bad feeling. However, he could not figure out what was wrong. While he was hesitating, he suddenly felt a strong wind coming from behind. Instinctively, he wanted to turn around. However, because his attention was on the pimp, he needed time to turn around. Just as he turned around, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his neck. Then, he fainted on the ground. Dao Xiao appeared behind Xisheng. Looking at the unconscious man, he shook his head and said, "Such a lack of vigilance. I don't know how you became a Qianhu of the embroidered uniform guard." After saying this, Dao Xiao angrily said to the man who acted as the pimp, "Cheng Gang, how did you act? You did not show the slightest bit of fear. You almost alerted him. Do you know that if he shouted outside, our plan would have failed?" "Yes, Captain, please calm down. I was also angry when I saw Xisheng. How could I have thought of pretending to be afraid?" The subordinate called Cheng Gang hurriedly admitted his mistake. He was afraid that Dao Xiao would continue to scold him on this issue. So he said, "Captain, let's hurry up. That Cai Tianxian has gone to take a bath. I'm afraid she will be back soon." "Oh right." Only then did Dao Xiao remember that this place was not safe. It was also not the time to make a conclusion. He nodded and let Cheng Gang help the unconscious Xisheng up. Then, Dao Xiao poured all the pills in the bottle into Xisheng's mouth. After Xisheng drank some water, he completely digested the pills. Then, he carried Xisheng back to the bed. One of them left through the window while the other left through the door. After a short while, Cai Tianxian, who had just finished her bath, entered the room. When she saw that Shishang was already on the bed, she couldn't help but reveal a coquettish look on her face. Then, she swayed her hips and walked to the bed. She had just taken off her clothes when Shishang woke up. The first thing he saw was Cai Tianxian, who looked like a little white rabbit. His eyes turned red and he pounced on her. Then, there was a loud shaking sound from the wooden bed. Shishang was dead. The next morning, when the subordinates saw that the Qianhu had not come out of the room, they knocked on the door and entered. The first thing they saw was Shishang lying dead on the bed with his eyes wide open. Cai Tianxian had also died with him. She had been tortured to death. His subordinate hurriedly did a checkup and concluded that Qianhu she had died of natural causes due to consuming too much aphrodisiac. Immediately, the news was sent to the Xining eunuch in the capital with the express speed of 600 li. At the same time that Shishang died, the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel and Imperial Censorship appeared on a ship. That ship was sailing through the sea, and its destination was Crimson City. Isn't this Imperial Censorship? Why are you here? Looking at the boundless ocean around him, then looking at his former colleague, Yu Qian's eyes widened, his face filled with curiosity and confusion. I don't know. This lowly official only took a nap. When I opened my eyes, I was already here. Shun Yu shook his head, a confused look on his face. It seems like we've been kidnapped. Yu Qian was smart and immediately understood his situation. At this moment, he saw a man dressed in camouflage clothes standing not far away. He shouted, "Hey, who are you? Why did you kidnap this official and imperial censorship? Do you know that we're very poor? We don't have any money, and no one will come to ransom us." Yu Qian truly didn't have any money. This point made him feel much more at ease. He really wanted to say that they had captured the wrong people and that they were useless. However, no matter how much Yu Qian shouted, the only response he got was the crashing and slapping of the waves. The soldier not far away seemed to have not heard his shouts and continued to stand there. He would occasionally glance in their direction, preventing them from jumping into the sea. Yu Qian and Xin Yu naturally wouldn't seek death. They wouldn't die before they figured out what was going on. But they also sadly discovered that they didn't know where they were. Where was the ship heading? What would the future hold? They only knew that they had left the Great Ming Dynasty and their future was uncertain. The immortal abode and sky beyond heaven were still very popular. Every day, people would line up to eat and stock up. This was especially true for the immortal abode. It was already the 12th month, and the weather was getting colder and colder. More and more people began to wear cotton robes on the streets. However, no matter how cold it was outside, the immortal abode was still as warm as spring all year round. Some of the private rooms even had to open their windows to let in some warm air. All of this was naturally because of the stove. Chapter 110. Yang Qindong had already considered the problem of the capital's climate. When the immortal abode was first built, he had hired craftsmen to install a large number of furnaces in the mezzanine. Once the weather turned cold and the coals were ignited, the heat would naturally dissipate. The guests quickly noticed that the immortal abode was as warm as spring. After asking around, they learned that it was because of the furnaces. Speaking of which, this sort of invisible heating method was far superior to placing a brazier in one's home. Many people immediately asked if they could pay the craftsmen of the immortal abode to install the furnaces in their homes. This was a business that Yang Qindong had originally planned to make money, so the staff very politely agreed. But because there were only a limited number of craftsmen and limited materials, not only was the installation extremely expensive, they also had to wait in line. But for the sake of keeping their homes as warm as spring, many people paid up and waited in line. This matter quickly spread, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, paid a visit to the Yang clan manor. The potatoes had been harvested long ago, and the seeds had been distributed. The embroidered uniform guard and Eastern Depot soldiers could no longer be seen outside the Yang clan manor. But even so, no one dared to cause trouble here. This was because all signs indicated that Yang Shima had an extremely good relationship with eunuch Wang Jin. The two would meet from time to time and converse for several hours at a time. With Wang Zhen as the flag, who would be stupid enough to take the initiative to find trouble with Yang Chendong? Although Shipu was the Minister of Works, a second-rank official in the imperial court, he was still nothing in front of Wang Zhen. Not only did he not want to offend Wang Zhen, but Minister Shi even got his current position because of Wang Zhen's relationship. Naturally, he had to be extremely polite to Yang Chendong. He couldn't just send an order like he would any other official, so he decided to personally come. Yang Chendong attached great importance to Shipu's visit. His father, Yang Rong, had once been the Minister of Works, so their relationship was quite close. When Shipu arrived and entered the main hall of the Yang clan manor, he was greeted by a wave of hot air. But he couldn't see a single brazier burning. He immediately knew that this place had to have been installed with furnaces. He couldn't help but say with envy, "Honorable nephew, your place really is like a paradise of immortals. Ha ha ha." Yang Chendong clasped his fist in the direction of the capital, a solemn expression on his face. "Uncle Shi praises me too much. This is all thanks to His Majesty's governance, allowing the realm to be at peace and the common people to live and work in peace." "That's right. His Majesty is quite diligent." Shipu laughed. The current Ming dynasty looked strong and prosperous, but that was just the capital left behind by Rinchuanji. When it came to Zhu Qizhen, he put eunuchs in important positions. These court officials, these representatives of Confucianism, were no longer as strong as they used to be. However, Shipu wouldn't tell Yang Chendong these things in depth. After all, he was just a junior and didn't deserve any deeper guidance. Listening to Shipu's nonchalant words, Yang Chendong chuckled without saying a word. "Uncle Shi, you didn't come here today just to chat with me, right?" "Haha, of course not. Let's not beat around the bush. This time I'm here for the furnace wall. You see, such a good thing should be shared with everyone." Shipu chuckled as if he was working for the country. When it came to serious matters, Yang Chendong's expression became awkward. "What's wrong? Does honorable nephew have some difficulty?" Seeing Yang Chendong's hesitant appearance, Shipu felt that this matter wasn't as simple as he had imagined. "Yes." Yang Chendong finally nodded his head and explained, "I won't hide it from Uncle Shi. When I first made this furnace wall, it was just an idea. Later on, I invested a great deal of manpower and resources to understand the principles. For this matter, Eunuch Wang also invested a great deal of money. Now that he has a share of the furnace wall, if I were to give it away for no good reason, I'm afraid that even if I agree, there will be others who won't." By raising Wang Zhen's name, Shipu was using his influence to suppress others. Looking at Shipu's appearance, it was clear that he wanted Yang Chendong to contribute the method of constructing the furnace wall for free. This was something that Yang Chendong couldn't accept. In the society of that time, there was no such thing as property rights. This was especially true for craftsmen. No matter how hard they worked or how much they invested, once they made something good, it would be promoted for free. As for the creator, he wouldn't receive any benefits. At most, the higher-ups would praise him verbally, but in terms of material benefits, there was nothing. This was because from everyone's point of view, the things you made should be contributed. Since it was contributed, why should there be any benefits? Under the heavens, all good things should belong to the emperor, and not a method for personal gain. This seemed to allow more people to benefit, but in reality it was extremely unfair to the creator. He spent money, time, and talent to make something that was easily used by others. His investment and output weren't proportional at all. In the long run, who would waste time to create something? Even if they didn't create something, they would still receive money. This kind of unfair treatment caused everyone to gradually lose their creativity. Now, Shipu was asking for this craftsmanship as if he was an ordinary craftsman. Since he was born and lived in the Great Ming Dynasty, then the things he made should also belong to the Great Ming Dynasty. Therefore, he should give it all to her. He was against this kind of working method in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. Why was everyone else like this, but only she was special? Therefore, Yang Chendong could only use Wang Zhen's name to suppress others. A while ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, and the Sichuan imperial censor, Shunyu, suddenly disappeared without a trace. No one knew if they were alive, and no one knew if they were dead. When this matter came out, everyone's suspicions were pointed at Wang Jin. This was because these two people had all kinds of conflicts with eunuch Wang. Now that they both disappeared, was there anyone else other than Wang Jin who had this kind of ability? However, there was no evidence, so no one could do anything to Wang Jin. They could only secretly guard against him. Now that the name was taken out, even Sherpu's expression turned ugly after hearing it. Before he came, he thought that Yang Chendong might not be willing to hand over the craftsmanship. But it didn't matter. He only needed to move him with emotion and reason. After all, he was still a fifth-rank official in the imperial court, so he should have this kind of awareness, right? However, when Wang Jin's name came out, Sherpu instantly lost his temper. Then, other than buying, is there no other way? Sherpu knew that forcing Wang Jin to hand over the craftsmanship wouldn't work, so he tried to ask. This, logically speaking, is not possible. Yang Chendong shook his head. However, when Sherpu's face turned gloomy, he continued, however, since Uncle Sher has personally come, I still have to give you face. How about this? Your Ministry of Works can provide copper in exchange for me sending someone to make the fireplace. How about it? Nowadays, most of the fireplaces in the market were made of copper and iron, and some of the parts were very delicate. For example, things like the screws were far from what the Ministry of Works could make. If he were to copy them, it was very likely that the quality of the product wouldn't be up to standard, resulting in all sorts of problems. Once a fire broke out, it would be a huge problem. It was precisely because of the uniqueness of this technology that the cost of installation was extremely high, to the point that ordinary officials couldn't accept it. As a result, many officials went to find Sherpu and said that since he was in charge of the Ministry of Works, this matter was within his jurisdiction. How to install the fireplace in everyone's homes should be his responsibility. In the end, these officials just didn't want to spend so much money to enjoy the benefits of the fireplace. Now, Yang Chendong gave a compromise. The technology couldn't be taught, but it could be exchanged with copper. This way, with the large amount of copper in the Ministry of Works warehouse, the problem of installing the fireplace could be solved. Could also be considered as solving Sherpu's urgent problem. Okay, then I'll thank nephew. Knowing that Yang Chendong was giving him face, Sherpu immediately said it as if he was afraid that the other party would go back on his word. Afterwards, the two of them discussed the amount of copper needed to exchange for a fireplace. During this time, Yang Chendong naturally demanded an exorbitant price. Although Sherpu felt that it was a bit high, he thought about how those things were temporarily useless in the warehouse, so he might as well exchange them for benefits first. If there was a shortage, he could just collect them from all over the country. Thus, he agreed. In the end, Sherpu left Yangjia Manor with a satisfied expression. After he left, when Xiao Yin came to clean up the tea, she asked Yang Chendong with curiosity and confusion, "Young master? Since he brought out Wang Jin's name, why did he agree to exchange copper? This way, won't we earn a lot less money?" Haha, Arin also knows how to use her brain to think about problems. Yang Chendong said with a big smile, "Young master, Iner has always used her brain. It's just that I'm not as smart as you, so I can't see it." Xiao Yin said somewhat coquettishly. Ever since the relationship between the two of them became real, in front of Yang Chendong, she became more and more like a little girl. "Right, young master, you still haven't said why." "Why?" Yang Chendong looked into the distance and was silent for a while before replying. "Even Iner said that I used Wang Jin's name to scare people. I'm sure the others would think the same, right?" This wasn't what the young master wanted to see. This time, he would let the Ministry of Works arrange the exchange of copper for furnace walls. Firstly, it would serve more people, and secondly, it would be a way to express goodwill to them so that they wouldn't hate the young master like they hated Wang Jin. Of course, the most important point is that Qiqian City lacks copper. The industry there is developing too quickly, especially the military factories and shipyards. As more and more advanced products are put into production, the shortage will only increase. Chapter 111. Although Gao Xiong and the others robbed at sea and obtained quite a bit of gold and silver, who would bring copper onto the ship? Now that we have obtained so much copper, we can solve their problem. This is something that no amount of silver can solve. Yang Qindong's explanation and reply allowed Xiao Yin to understand. She immediately said happily, "So you're saying that we've profited this time?" "Of course we've profited." Yang Qindong also smiled and nodded. In his heart, he thought that if it wasn't for the fact that Sherpu and the others couldn't see the importance of copper, they wouldn't have succeeded so easily this time. Sherpu had made a trip to the Yang clan manor and then transported quite a bit of copper to exchange for ready-made fireplaces. For a moment, this had alleviated the officials' need for fireplaces and received praise from the officials. This had also improved Yang Qindong's reputation among the officials. Before this, there were still a few officials who had installed fireplaces in advance, such as the direct relatives of the Yang clan and the Hu clan. In the Hu clan, no matter how cold it was outside, it was like spring all year round in here. Naturally, this was all thanks to the installation of the fireplaces. We're all thanks to young Mississippi, in the bedroom. Xiaoqing, who was still wearing her summer clothes, giggled as she looked at young Miss Hu Yen who was dressing up in front of the dressing table. Her eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled. "Xiaoqing, you're asking for a beating." Hearing the maidservant teasing her, Hu Yen, whose face was slightly red, turned around and raised her arm as if to hit Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing had already jumped far away and was still giggling as she said, "Young Miss still won't admit it? Look at those important officials who haven't installed a fireplace. Even those Duke's Manors who spent a lot of money still have to wait in line. Yet, our Hu clan didn't do anything and installed everything that should be installed. Also, the mirror in young Mrs. room, the perfume, the glass on the window, which one of them isn't priceless and is limited in supply. Yet, you can see them all here. What does the East Marshal want? Everyone in the capital knows, so how could young Miss not know?" Knowing that she wouldn't be able to hit Xiaoqing, Hu Yen simply returned to her chair. She shook her unkempt hair and said, "You all know, but why hasn't he come to propose marriage? It's going to be the new year soon, and I'll be 17 years old." "Ah, so young Miss was looking forward to a marriage proposal. You really don't know shame." After little Qing heard this, she skipped over again. "All right, little Qing, I'm talking business with you. You said that he treats me so well and the whole family can see it, but why didn't he ask for my hand in marriage? What is he waiting for?" Hu Yen said with a bitter smile. Many 16-year-old girls were already married. However, Yang Qindong didn't even propose marriage, which made her a little uncertain. "I don't know." Once they started talking about serious matters, little Qing regained her serious look and shook her head vigorously. However, she quickly nodded and said, "If we don't know, we can find someone to ask. Isn't young Miss often in contact with big sister Yang? Why don't we find an opportunity to ask her and let her ask her brother? It shouldn't be a problem, right?" "Yes." Hu Yen nodded, thinking that little Qing's idea was not bad. In her mind, she began to think of a time to go to the Wangfu and see Yang family's eldest sister, Yang Fei, to sound her out. 1449, the first month of the 14th year of the Zhengtong dynasty. Within Qiqian City. With the agreement of Gao Xiong, Leng Song, and a bunch of military officers, instructors, and political instructors, the attack on Lukong began. They used 2 months to get a clear understanding of the situation in Lukong and Taichung. Coincidentally, the shipyard had developed a new generation of fast ships, and they had officially tested it, proving its superiority. When the Navy and land forces announced that they would attack Lukong at dawn tomorrow, they would occupy it by land and sea, and then take down Taichung. In order to ensure the success of this operation and to reduce their own casualties and losses. For this battle, they would use the new ships number 1, number 2, and number 3 as the vanguard, led by Gao Xiong himself. There were 4 new ships. Number 4 went to South America and North America to search for rubber trees, and there were 100 ships of different sizes. There were 100 ships of other models, carrying 3 regular Navy companies and 2,000 auxiliary Navy soldiers. The moment they appeared, they would appear on Lukong with lightning speed and catch the enemy off guard. On land, Leng Song personally led the troops, using 3 regular army companies and 2,000 auxiliary army soldiers. After taking down Lukong, they went straight for Taichung and took over half of Ryukyu Island. Before this, a total of 3 exercises had been conducted, and any problems that might arise had been properly resolved. Filled with confidence, a total of 4,600 soldiers ate dinner and rested for 4 hours before the army set off. They slowly approached Port Deer without making a single sound. On the ocean, the moonlight shone, and the ripples were like a mirror that had been split into hundreds of pieces, reflecting huge shadows. New Number 1, New Number 2, and New Number 3, which had just been completed by the shipyard, were 3 large and fast ships. Faintly, they appeared in the ocean 20 miles away from Deer Port. Behind him, there were hundreds of horse ships, grain ships, warships, and warships of all kinds. Gao Xiong, who was leading the team, stood in the command cabin of the New Number 1 ship. When he looked up, a dark cloud happened to appear, blocking the bright moonlight. He was the one who issued a clear and loud order. "Let's go!" Just as the order was given, the sound of the ship's engine starting could be heard. Back then, the ships relied on human power to move the sails when there was wind, but the oars when there was no wind. The biggest difference between the new ships and them was that they had internal combustion engines, usually diesel engines, that were connected by shafts and had propellers that spun. The propellers would stir the water, and the water would give a reaction force that would be transmitted to the ship through the shafts and diesel engines, pushing the ship forward. This way, not only could they save a lot of manpower and resources, but more importantly, they were extremely fast. It was only a distance of 20 miles, but they arrived at Deer Harbor in less than 15 minutes. They had never thought that someone would come looking for trouble from the sea. At this moment, the gates were wide open, like an unguarded city that never sleeps. It wasn't until the Number 1, Number 2, and Number 3 warships lined up in a straight line and prepared their Type 90 60mm mortars to fire that the warships belonging to the First Shang dynasty in Deer Port finally came to their senses. In the dark night, it was impossible to see how many enemy ships were there. However, once they discovered the enemy, the 300-odd warships in the harbor were about to retaliate. When the alarm sounded, countless sailors ran out from the military camp on land. From the looks of it, they were about to board the ship to face the enemy. In the harbor, there were more than 10 warships from the First Shang dynasty that were stationed there all year round. They were about to turn and face the enemy. Attack! If anyone dares to retaliate, sink them all. In the command cabin, Gao Xiong issued orders as he stared intently at Deer Harbor for any signs of movement. Boom, boom, boom! Following the order, the Number 1, Number 2, and Number 3 cannons on the Number 1, Number 2, and Number 3 ships started firing at the moving enemy ships. The powerful flames were like the brightest beacon in the dark night, instantly lighting up half of Lukong. At the same time, a few moving warships from the First Shang dynasty were hit and destroyed. The powerful modern cannons had an unimaginable attack power. No matter what kind of ship it was, as long as it was hit by the cannons, it would immediately shatter into pieces. There would only be the sound of people screaming and not the slightest bit of resistance. 3 cannons at a time. After 3 consecutive rounds, the precision of the cannons made the First Shang dynasty's warships that were moving like snails into fixed targets. The only thing they could do was to become the target of the cannons and wait for the cannons to hit them. The flames soared into the sky and the sound of people screaming spread out, causing the sailors on land who wanted to board the ships to stop in their tracks in fear. Who is it? How could their firearms be so powerful? If we charge onto the ships now, how is that different from seeking death? The sailors didn't dare to act rashly. After all, no one was an idiot. No one would dare to charge forward even if they knew that they would die. In the command room of Number 1, Gao Xiong was looking at the scene in front of him proudly. He didn't give the order to fire the cannons as he was following Yang Qindong's orders. There were too many Han people on Ryukyu Island, and it was best not to kill people of his own race. Furthermore, the 9 cannons were enough to cause the enemy to panic. His ambush mission was already more than half completed. Now he just had to wait for the other ships to catch up. Then, it would be time for the army to press forward and seize the ships and captives. Using the fact that the ships behind were too slow and didn't have enough space to catch up, Gao Xiong turned his head and looked at Yu Qian and Xinyu, who were staring at him in disbelief. "Two sirs? In your opinion, how is the strength of our navy?" "Amazing. Inconceivable, simply inconceivable. Wherever the cannons go, who can fight against them?" Xin Yu's face was full of shock as he sighed. Even Yu Qian, an important minister recorded in the history of the Ming dynasty, a man who had once single-handedly reversed the history of the Ming dynasty, didn't have a trace of calmness at this moment. His eyes were also wide open as he stared at the scene in front of him. In fact, what Yu Qian saw was too many things that could surprise him. Ever since he was captured and transported to Qiqian City, he felt that everything he saw was like a dream. The spacious cement roads in the city, the orderly streets, the lush green trees, the rosy complexions of the people who were happy every day, and the new army that always maintained a high spirit. All of this was something he didn't even dare to dream about. Chapter 112. Everyone had something to do and money to earn. Regardless of their birth, as long as one of their parents was Han, they would be able to receive a good education from a young age. When people fell sick, they would have money to treat them, and the greatest guarantee was the possibility of dying from illness. There were 3 meals a day, not 2. Not only that, they could eat meat for every meal, and everyone had new clothes to wear. This seemed to be something that only humans could dream of, right? But right now, all of this was happening in Crimson City. Those bright windows were something that even the Great Ming Imperial Palace didn't have the money to install, but it was extremely common here. There were also power plants, munitions factories, furniture factories, garment factories, cement factories, shipyards, glass factories, paper factories, and so on that he had never heard of before. Wherever he went, he was shocked, and it was the kind of shock that went straight to the bottom of his heart. If it wasn't for Crimson City, he wouldn't have known that the world could be so beautiful. After 2 months of visiting, Yu Qian finally found out that this was the property of Yang Shima, who didn't have a high position in the capital and didn't have much authority. Everything here was made by this person. This place was even more prosperous than the capital in Nanjing, and it was actually the private property of the 6th young master of the Yang clan. Then what was he trying to do? Yu Qian couldn't understand, or rather, he didn't dare to think about it. But after witnessing the naval battle of Deer Harbor tonight, he finally realized that his suspicions were about to come true. As an official of the Great Ming Dynasty, the first thing he had to do was to spread the news of this place. It would be best if he could let all the officials in the court know about what was happening in Crimson City. But could he escape? And if he really did go out, would anyone believe him if he told them what he saw? Even if someone believed him, with the current military strength of the Ming Dynasty, would they be able to defeat the new army in Crimson City? All sorts of thoughts flashed through his mind like a movie. Yu Qian realized that the expansion of Crimson City was unavoidable, and it wasn't something that could be stopped by human strength. Gao Xiong chuckled and proudly looked at the 2 people who were named by the 6th young master to take special care of. From his point of view, what important officials of the Great Ming Dynasty. At this moment, they had probably been blinded by everything in front of them and were scared out of their wits. On the land of Deer Harbor, thousands of sailors stood there, not daring to move. The flames in front of them seemed to be a warning to them. If they dared to step into the warship, they would be smashed into smithereens. Who wouldn't be afraid of death? This was especially so for the first Shang dynasty, who knew that they would definitely die and couldn't even pay their soldiers. Hesitation could be seen in the eyes of the soldiers. What's going on? Why haven't you boarded yet? What are you waiting for? A loud roar sounded out. Just as the Navy members were hesitating to move forward, a man wearing the first Shang dynasty's military uniform rushed over with his troops. General Pan has come. Some of the sailors had already recognized the identity of the person who had come. Pan Tao, the general guarding Deer Harbor. He was also one of the trusted generals of the first Shang dynasty's 13-year-old king, Shang De. It was because of Pan Tao's existence that Deer Harbor became an impregnable pass. It became the biggest barrier between Qiqian City and the first Shang dynasty. Pan Tao also heard the commotion outside and brought thousands of troops over. From afar, he first saw the flames that soared into the sky. Following that, he saw the thousands of sailors standing together on the shore in a mess. Seeing that a huge battle was about to happen, all the sailors actually didn't board the warship but stayed on the shore. Instantly, he was furious. Just as he got closer, a loud roar sounded out. The sailors who were originally hesitating were all frightened when they saw Pan Tao bringing his troops over. They started to walk towards the warship that was anchored at the harbor. This Pan Tao was famous for killing people without blinking. If they stayed here, they would be killed by this person before they could be killed by the powerful cannons. Since they were going to die no matter what, they might as well try their luck on the warship. Over 300 warships, even if only a third of them managed to make it out, it would still be a bloody battle for the Yang family navy. Even if they had advanced weapons, casualties would still be unavoidable. The situation of the battle seemed to be changing. At this moment, the Yang family army that was already prepared on land began to move. Sniper rifle. Can you find Pan Tao's exact location? Lung Song, who was hiding 800 meters away from Deer Harbor, used the night vision binoculars in his hands to see everything that was happening. When he realized that Pan Tao's appearance could cause chaos in the battle and increase the difficulty of taking over Deer Harbor, he asked the sniper beside him who was skilled in shooting. Reporting to battalion commander, there are too many people and they are too densely packed. We can't accurately hit the target. The sniper shook his head dejectedly. Was it because his shooting skills were bad? It wasn't that his observation skills weren't good enough or that the range of the sniper rifle wasn't good enough. It was just that there were too many people, densely packed and extremely chaotic. It wasn't realistic to want to take Pan Tao's life with one shot. Hearing that the sniper couldn't complete his mission successfully, a sharp glint flashed across Lung Song's eyes. He seemed to have made up his mind as he said, "Rocket launchers, get ready. Everyone move forward. When you have enough range, fire indiscriminately." Originally, he only wanted to take Pan Tao's life. However, the scouts found out that this person was entrusted with an important task by the first Shang dynasty's king, Shang De. It was impossible for him to surrender. Since that was the case, he could only kill him. Although this person was also a descendant of the Han people, if he died, more Han people would submit to him. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. However, the situation didn't allow it. He could only let Leng Song kill more people. War had always been cruel and there was no right or wrong. This was because history was written by the victors. Leng Song gave the order, and the 3 companies of 300 outstanding Cold Vanguard soldiers moved forward with him. Behind them were 2,000 auxiliary soldiers. Even though they were auxiliary soldiers, their movements were still nimble. Even though they were following behind the main soldiers, they weren't too far behind. On Deer Port, because of Pan Tao's appearance, there were Navy members who were walking towards their ships. However, no matter how you looked at it, these people's speed wasn't fast enough. They were like crawling snails. "All of you, hurry up. Whoever is behind will be punished for disobeying orders. Ahead." Seeing that this was going to continue, who knew how long it would take for them to form enough resistance on the sea? Pan Tao roared angrily. As expected, the moment the order was given, the Navy members' movements became much faster. In the new command cabin, Gao Xiong was observing everything through his binoculars. When he saw more enemies boarding the ships, he couldn't help but say anxiously, "This Leng Song, what is he doing? Why isn't he launching a land attack? Forget it. Forget it. Order the cannons to extend and fire at the enemies boarding the ships." Boom, boom, boom. The 3 new ships fired 3 cannons as planned, hitting the intersection of the waterways in Deer Port. The powerful shockwave from the explosion instantly took away at least 100 lives. The number of injured people who were hit by the shockwave was uncountable. After the 3 cannons were fired, Lung Song led the army to the left side of the enemy 200 meters away. Immediately, 5 rocket launchers fired at the same time, launching an indiscriminate attack. Wherever General Pan Tao was suspected to be, he became the focus of the firepower. Boom, 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 boom. After the 5 consecutive shots under the powerful firepower, a large number of enemies fell to the ground. Waves of cries and howls could be heard. Countless broken limbs were scattered everywhere. Advance in attack formation. Anyone who doesn't surrender, kill. Leng Song saw that the first wave of rocket launchers had caused heavy damage to the enemy. He was the first to stand up from the ground. Following him, the 300 soldiers of the Lung army marched forward in a straight line, maintaining a complete formation. Yang Chendong had taught them before that if they could attack, they shouldn't defend. He also said that attacking was the best defense and also the last resort to solve all problems. Following this order, and to reduce the number of casualties, Leng Song decided not to attack. Once they attacked, they had to hurt the enemy until they didn't know which direction was north, south, east, and west. Only then would they choose to surrender faster. The 300 soldiers of the Lung army spat out tongues of fire from their guns. In the darkness, they were like an unbreakable fire net as they closed in step by step. Behind them, the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers wielding large swords and spears weren't idle either. Although they couldn't walk in front with spears because of their status, they still shouted in unison, "Those who surrender will not be killed. Those who surrender will not be killed." In the chaos of the cannons, the place where Pan Tao was at became the focus of the attack. After losing contact with the general, facing the continuous barrage of fire, those who wanted to attack with swords were shot and fell to the ground, not moving at all. Under such a strong pressure, the Shang dynasty soldiers guarding Deerport were forced to retreat. Countless times, reality told them that those who wanted to charge with weapons would inevitably die. In such a situation where they would die if they charged forward, no one could muster up the courage to charge forward. Just as the army was advancing with an unstoppable momentum, the Yang family navy finally arrived. Under the primitive speed of the boat, which only relied on the sails and the rowers, the distance of 20 miles took them nearly 2 incense sticks of time longer than the other boats. But no matter what, they still managed to arrive. Then it was the arrival of the army. The huge commotion had already created a psychological pressure on the soldiers of Deerport. Those who kneel and surrender will not be killed. Chapter 113. The shouts continued to come from the mouths of the 2,000 auxiliary soldiers. These shouts were the last straw that broke the camel's back. Seeing that the tide was turning, the first Shang dynasty soldier finally threw his weapon to the ground, squatted down and hugged his head, making a gesture of surrender. With the first person, the second, the third, and soon the sound of weapons being thrown to the ground could be heard. This army had completely lost their morale. The Yang family navy quickly stationed themselves at Deer Harbor. Large batches of auxiliary soldiers walked out of the warships and picked up the weapons that were thrown on the ground in an orderly manner. Then, groups of captives were tied together like candied haws. Battalion Commander Gao, I'll leave this place to you. I'll lead the army and rush to Taichung City. We'll try to liberate the place before dawn. Leng Song walked in front of Gao Xiong, who had just landed, and saluted with a hint of excitement on his face. Some people were born to be soldiers. They weren't afraid of war. On the contrary, if there was no war, they would feel that something was missing. Leng Song and Gao Xiong were clearly such people. All right, Battalion Commander Leng, just go. Leave this place to me. Oh right, do you need me to send some men to assist you? After all, Taichung is a big city on Ryukyu Island. Gao Xiong asked with concern. No need. According to the investigation, there aren't many soldiers there. I'll lead 3 companies of Lung Feng and 2,000 auxiliary soldiers to control the place. Let's go. Leng Song rejected Gao Xiong's support and turned to lead the army towards Taichung City. Keep a close eye on the captives. But remember, don't abuse them or scold them. Gao Xiong watched as Lung Feng left and began to clean up the mess. What was worth mentioning was that Yu Qian and Shen Yu were also busy. They did not know that after more than 2 months of experience, they had gradually begun to adapt to the environment and life here. Moreover, they had already subconsciously treated themselves as a part of Crimson City, doing what they could to the best of their abilities. Taichung City. The city walls were more than 10 meters tall and could be considered one of the biggest cities on Ryukyu Island. There were nearly 200,000 people here. Many of them had migrated here from the mainland. They slowly adapted to life here and spread their branches and leaves. Deer Harbor was only a dozen or so kilometers away. When the cannons roared in the distance, the citizens in the city could more or less sense it. This caused many people to anxiously stay at home, not daring to go out and ask around. It was like the darkness before dawn, causing the entire city to be under a terrifying pressure. It was as if any spark could ignite it. After more than an hour, Lung Song led the army to Taichung City. With their arrival, the city gates opened from the inside. This was the work of the infiltration team. The city gates opened and without much effort, the army entered the city. Following that, they quickly took control of the important officials of the First Shang dynasty and the 4 city gates. As for the less than 500 guards in the city, they were either killed or surrendered. There was no third option. They took control of the entire Taichung city in an instant. This was the well-trained Leng Feng. They did not harm a single person, nor did they steal anything from the citizens. The next morning, when some brave citizens pushed open their doors and walked out onto the streets, they realized that there were many tall, fit, and energetic young soldiers. They were different from the original city guards. They were courteous and did not offend the people. When some people fell on the street out of fear of seeing them, these patrolling and maintaining law and order soldiers would stop and help them up. They were as amiable as big brothers who had been neighbors for many years. The actions of the auxiliary soldiers eventually influenced the citizens in the city. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and more citizens walked out of their homes. Taichung City was as before. With lightning speed, they took down Deer Harbor in a single night. Under the rapid march, they took down Taichung City without shedding a drop of blood. This caused the situation on Ryukyu Island to change drastically. Originally, with Crimson Castle as the base, it only took up 1/8 of the entire Ryukyu Island. However, after taking down Chishan, Alishan, Yushan, Lukong, and Taichung, they had taken over at least 2/3 of the island. The remaining 1/3 was where the First Shang dynasty's capital was located, which was the central north region. However, it was also the most densely populated place on Ryukyu Island. In the Battle of Deer Harbor and Taichung, they killed more than 1,000 enemies and captured more than 11,000 people. This greatly increased the population of the Yang clan, allowing them to reach a population of 400,000. Including the auxiliary soldiers, they had close to 10,000 people. They took over 300 ships and more than 5,000 sailors. This battle greatly increased the strength of the Yang clan. At the same time, it allowed them to become the strongest faction on Ryukyu Island. The Battle of Deer Harbor was a battle where they won with a small number of people. At the same time, it also proved that quality was more important than quantity. However, at this time, whether it was Gao Xiong or Leng Song, they didn't want to expand their gains and enter the central region. Under the rapid development, the Yang clan needed to stabilize and digest. They didn't want to continue swallowing. Otherwise, there might be internal chaos. Yang Chendong once said that battles had to be fought one by one and cities had to be conquered one by one. One shouldn't only think about conquering territory and neglect internal development. If that happened, the quality of life of the people would deteriorate. If that happened, the building might collapse at any time. What the new army needed now was to digest everything that they had just obtained. This might take half a year or even longer. These people needed to redistribute the land, learn new things, learn how to be hygienic and polite, and completely integrate into the Yang clan system. In half a year, they would only learn the surface. Fortunately, both the new army and Yang Chendong, who was their leader, were young enough. They still had time to develop everything. Moreover, they could use this time to negotiate with the First Shang dynasty and see if there was any hope of peacefully taking over the central region and reducing the killing. Negotiation. This was one of the Yang clan's methods, a way to stall for time. They needed to digest their gains. Negotiation. This was indeed the only way for the First Shang dynasty to resolve the current crisis. After Leng Song expressed his willingness to negotiate, the other party's diplomatic group arrived. They were extremely humble and directly expressed their intention to submit. They expressed that they were willing to become a vassal state and were willing to pay tribute every year. However, they also stated their request, which was to ensure the existence of autonomy. With Taichung as the dividing line, the northern region would belong to the first Shang dynasty and the southern region would belong to the Yang clan. Such an outcome was clearly not in line with Yang Qindong's previous plans. He wanted to fully occupy Little Ryukyu Island. Since they couldn't come to an agreement, they could talk slowly. Once the new army digested their gains, they could start another war and completely solve the problem of Little Ryukyu Island. Yang Qindong's forces were developing rapidly. In the capital, he was quietly preparing for the new year in the Yang clan manner. 1449, the 14th year of the Zhengzhou dynasty. This year would be recorded in the annals of history. If everything went as expected, the famous Tumu Fortress incident would occur this year, signifying the beginning of the Ming dynasty's decline. In truth, from the moment he entered the capital, Yang Qindong had been thinking about his next move. He already knew what was going to happen. With Yang Qindong's abilities, he was completely capable of changing history and nipping in the bud. But he had never done so. In fact, he had only been using his troops on Little Ryukyu Island. In the Great Ming, he had only been developing commerce and establishing Yangbao and the Immortal Abode. He was afraid that if he made too big of a move, it would affect the course of history. In the current Ming dynasty, eunuchs were in power, causing all the ministers to feel insecure. Treacherous officials were in power, and even the position of eunuch was hereditary. If this continued, something would happen to the Great Ming sooner or later, and the only ones to suffer would be the common people. As a Han, Yang Qindong naturally didn't want to see his compatriots suffer. What he wanted was to see the Han grow stronger and become the rulers of the world. For this goal, the hundreds of thousands of Han brothers in the Tumu Fortress incident could only become sacrificial lambs. With a sigh, Yang Qindong thought about how many loyal officials and generals would die in the Tumu Fortress incident. This was a loss for the Great Ming, a loss for the country. But when he thought about how he couldn't do anything with his current status and influence, even if he mobilized the Chizian army, he might draw the ire of the imperial court and the tolerance of the Walla. After all, to resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify internal affairs. Young master, big sister is here. Yang Qindong sighed in his study when he saw Xiaoyin enter with a smile. Big sister is here? Hearing that Yang Fei was here, Yang Qindong immediately got up and went out to welcome her. Among his brothers and sisters, he had the deepest feelings for his big sister, and he respected her the most. Other than the fact that she had raised him when he was young, it was also because Yang Fei gave him the feeling that she was like a mother. In the main hall of the Yang family manor, Yang Fei sat on a chair and tasted tea. Behind her stood two personal maids. Thinking back, when Yang Fei got married, the Yang family was at the peak of its power, so she naturally married into a good family. At that time, the Wang family was also a large family. Now, big sister's husband, Wang Meng, had become a rank 5 official at the Ministry of Rights in his early 40s. Wang Meng was a scholarly person, and he treated Yang Fei with respect. The two of them had always lived in harmony. Yang Fei was knowledgeable and had the style of a noble mother. The entire Wang family was managed by her in an orderly manner, and she had been praised by many people. Chapter 114. Just looking at Yang Fei, her life was pretty good and she should be satisfied. But because of her younger brothers and sisters, she had no choice but to worry about them. Sometimes, she would even think of ways to help them financially. Over the years, her body was not as good as before. Fortunately, Yang Qindong entered the capital. His appearance changed the situation of the descendants of the Yang family. This made Yang Fei feel that the pressure on her was reduced by a lot. As for her other sisters, they could get 1,000 taels of silver from Yang Qindong every month. After having money, her position in her husband's family naturally rose. In addition, it was rumored that the 6th young master of the Yang family had a good relationship with eunuch Wang Jin. This made them even more afraid to make things difficult for the Yang family. Suddenly, Yang Fei did not need to worry about her sisters and felt that she had nothing to do. Not long ago, the daughter of the Hu family, Hu Yen, came looking for her. Although she did not say anything and only gave a simple greeting, Yang Fei knew what she was thinking. Thinking that her little brother would be 19 years old after the new year, it was time to settle the problem of marriage. Thus, she came looking for her before the new year. Big sister. Still wearing his green clothes, Yang Qindong appeared with a smile. He did not know why, but in front of Yang Fei, he could always put down the burden on his body and become relaxed. Is big sister's body much better? I still have a few anti-inflammatory medicines here. When big sister leaves, bring them back. If you have any headache or fever, you can use them at your discretion. Good, big sister's body is already fine. I have troubled little brother. Yang Fei's face was full of smiles. Her eyes were filled with satisfaction and happiness. Originally, she thought that the few young master of the Yang family did not live up to expectations and that the Yang family would decline from now on. She never thought that Yang Qindong, who did not speak much when he was young, would suddenly change greatly after he grew up and become so talented. This was an unexpected surprise and also let Yang Fei see the hope of the Yang family rising again. You are my big sister. It is natural for little brother to care about you. Regarding Yang Qindong calling him little brother, this special title, not only did Yang Qindong not object, he even felt at ease. He felt that this was a kind of intimacy. Of course, if it was someone else who called him little brother, he would probably be the first to object. Even if his second brother called him little six, he would get angry. That's right, you still know that I'm your big sister? Since little brother is so concerned about big sister should also be concerned about little brother. Tell me, what do you think of the Hu family's Hu Yan? Yang Qindong's face suddenly became much more serious as she stared at Yang Qindong with bright eyes. Hearing that big sister was actually doing this for Hu Yan, Yang Qindong coughed lightly and said somewhat awkwardly, "Big sister, little brother is still young. I don't want to. I have no choice but to do so. Let me tell you this time, don't play dumb with me. You have to give big sister a clear attitude. Is it okay or not? If it's okay, I will immediately send someone to the Hu family to propose marriage. If it's not okay, you have to tell them so that they don't get in the way." Yang Fei stared at Yang Qindong for an answer. The reason why she was so serious was probably because whenever she mentioned this matter in the past, Yang Qindong would change the topic, causing her to not know where the topic went every time. Today, she had made sufficient preparations. If she didn't get an answer, she definitely wouldn't give up. Big sister's eyes stared closely at Yang Qindong, causing him to feel even more awkward. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. He only scratched his head and said, "Little brother thinks that this matter really doesn't need to be too anxious." Yang Qindong, who had always been calm in the face of trouble and gave others the feeling that he was always successful and ignorant, was indeed at a loss like a child right now. This appearance directly caused Xiaoyin, who was beside him, to cover her mouth and laugh softly. Not only that, the two personal maids following behind Yang Fei also had smiles on their faces. Clearly, they also rarely saw the sixth young master, who had always been calm and collected, reveal such a childish appearance. Big sister Yang Qindong, on the other hand, couldn't help but sigh softly when she saw Yang Qindong in such a difficult position. Little brother, you might think that big sister is a little overbearing, but think about it. Hu Yan has always stayed in the word pavilion for you. Now she will be 17 after the new year. During this time, who knows how many nobles have come to propose marriage, but they were all rejected. She is waiting for you. Then, even if you think that you are still young, you have to give her an explanation. You can't just wait bitterly like this. What is going on? She wanted Yang Qindong to be responsible for her. If he couldn't bear this responsibility, then he had to tell her and let her prepare early. At the very least, he couldn't delay her. Yang Qindong knew that Yang Fei's words were very reasonable. He immediately replied, "Yes, big sister is right. How about this? I will propose marriage to the Hu clan at the end of this year." Taking a deep breath, Yang Qindong made his decision. This wasn't just because Yang Qindong knew that Hu Yan liked him. In fact, he also liked this playful and cute girl very much. In addition, her background was the granddaughter of the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao. She was definitely a descendant of a prestigious family. Marrying such a girl would also be helpful for him when he wanted to leave in the future. This was equivalent to him finding a strong ally in the imperial court. Yang Qindong finally gave an answer. Yang Fei let out a long sigh of relief. Okay, little brother, this is what you said. I will reply to the Hu clan like this. When the time comes, you can't go back on your words. I won't go back on my words. I won't go back on my words. Yang Qindong shook his head and smiled bitterly. He really didn't expect that his first marriage in 2 lifetimes would be completed under pressure. Of course, this was also his own choice. If he didn't want to, then in this world, there really wasn't anyone who could make things difficult for him. Seeing that the young master had finally decided on his marriage, Xiao Yin was also happy. Although she was already the young master's bed-warming servant girl and had even done the deed of husband and wife, she was very clear in her heart that with her background, being able to reach this step was already very difficult. Wanting to become the main wife, this was simply impossible in the society of that time. Fortunately, she had interacted with Hu Yen before. This girl was kind-hearted and should be easy to get along with. Finally deciding on marriage, when the news spread back to the Hu clan, Hu Yen was naturally full of joy. Although she still had to wait for nearly a year, she was willing to endure it. In her opinion, she was destined to be the Dong Shuai's bride. As for the night, it wasn't a big deal. The clan head was getting married at the end of the year. When the news spread throughout the Yang clan manor, all of the villagers were extremely happy. Ever since the patriarch came to the Yang village, the villagers' lives were getting better day by day. Today, during the new year, each family was given 20 caddies of meat and 2 taels of silver. This kind of treatment was something that even their ancestors had never experienced before. For a moment, everyone was overjoyed. The bells of the new year rang out, and the capital fell into a celebratory mood. The immortal abode didn't require any seats. Every day, several thousand people came in and money poured in. The novel programs and moving music made everyone who entered applaud. Naturally, this place became a popular place for wealthy guests. Just the number of people who applied for membership cards increased by several times. The total number of people who applied for 3 types of membership added up to 3,000. Just the sheer number of members made it so that if one wanted to spend money in the immortal abode, they had to make a reservation in advance. This made the business even more explosive. A large amount of money flowed into Yang Qindong's hands, causing others to gnash their teeth in anger. Some of the restaurants in the area and even some of the red light district's businesses were greatly affected. With new music to listen to, who would want to listen to old songs that had been memorized countless times? The popularity of the immortal abode naturally drew the envy of many, but compared to the profits of the sky beyond heaven, it paled in comparison. The sky beyond heaven silently opened for business 3 days after the immortal abode opened for business. Because of the novelty of its products, it instantly became popular. This was especially true after the immortal abode introduced a limited supply system. Many merchants had no choice but to squeeze their way in. Putting aside the other products, only 500 large bags of toilet paper were sold each day, for a total of 5,000 small bags. This was simply not enough to satisfy the needs of the high officials and nobles of the capital, and this wasn't even taking into account the many wealthy merchants of lower status who still had plenty of money in their pockets. After getting used to this soft paper, who would want to replace it with anything else? Even though a large bag of toilet paper sold for the astronomical price of 2 taels of silver, it was still sold out every morning when the store opened for business. Just this alone made a profit of 2,000 taels of silver, but in reality, even with the cost of transportation, it didn't even make 10 taels of silver. This was an almost invisible cost. Just the unremarkable toilet paper alone could make 2,000 taels of silver a day. That was more than 50,000 taels of silver a month. From this, one could see just how lucrative the profits were. There was also a perfume that no one had ever seen before. Not to mention anything else. Just the beautiful glass bottle that was used to package the perfume was worth quite a lot. Only 100 bottles were sold every day, but each bottle was sold at a price of 50 taels. It was enough for the young ladies of the rich families to snatch it up in an instant. In this way, they could make another 100,000 taels of silver a month. There was no need to mention all these things one by one. The popularity of the Sky Beyond Heaven was mainly due to the novelty of its products. Even when other merchants saw them, they felt as if they couldn't touch them. The limited supply of goods made it impossible for them to store large quantities of goods. What if they couldn't even meet the demand in the capital? How could they possibly sell these goods elsewhere? Businessmen were all profit-seeking. For their own interests, they had looked for Yang Fu more than once. This was the spokesperson of Dong Shuai in the business world. They expressed that they hoped to get more goods. They even said that they did not care about the price, as long as there were goods for them to sell. After all, no matter how expensive it would still have to be sold at a higher price. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.